Chapter 932, The Secret That Could Tear Them Apart. As the red mist cleared, the battlefield was a gruesome sight to behold. The ground was stained red with blood, and body parts were scattered everywhere. The air was filled with the stench of death and burning flesh. The surviving guardians and soldiers were in a state of shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. They looked around, trying to make sense of the carnage that had taken place. The storm continued to rage on, and the darkness that had enveloped the battlefield made it almost impossible to see. The only light came from the occasional flashes of lightning that illuminated the sky, revealing glimpses of the destruction and chaos that surrounded them. The wind howled through the ruins of buildings and the debris that littered the ground, making it difficult to hear anything but the roar of the storm. It was a disorienting and terrifying experience with no end in sight. The darkness seemed to press in on them from all sides, making it hard to breathe and adding to the overwhelming sense of fear and dread. The once bustling city was now a desolate wasteland. The buildings were destroyed and the streets were empty except for the piles of rubble and debris. The storm still raged on, but the thunder was muffled as if it was mourning the loss of the fallen soldiers. The sky was still pitch black, and the darkness seemed to have consumed everything. The guardians and soldiers looked at each other, their faces a mix of horror and disbelief. They knew they had just witnessed something beyond their understanding, something they would never forget for the rest of their lives. As everyone's eyes were fixed on the pitch-black sky, the black clouds loomed closer and closer. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness and slowly descended toward them. The flashes of lightning illuminated his figure, revealing the ominous presence of the Dark Lord. His form was engulfed in a shroud of darkness. The billowing black coat he wore whipped around him in the violent wind, and the two swords on his back were fashioned in the shape of a menacing X. The Dark Lord's eyes glowed with a devilish light, a menacing blend of red and black that sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to look directly into them. His arrival stunned everyone into silence, and as they sensed his cultivation level, their hearts began to race with fear. He was at the half-celestial level, and the power that radiated from him was suffocating. The darkness that enveloped him seemed to spread and expand, leaving the battlefield in even deeper darkness. The guardians and Nagaland soldiers could feel the weight of his presence, and the atmosphere around them became heavy and tense. The storm that had been raging seemed to quieten down in comparison to the arrival of the Dark Lord. His presence was overwhelming, and it was as if he was challenging anyone to dare to oppose him. As the Dark Lord descended, the very air around him seemed to change. Even the vampires and the undead fell to their knees in fear, paying their respects to his overwhelming power. His gaze was fixed solely on the castle's rooftop, and he floated towards it with menacing grace. The angels surrounding the group felt the pressure building around them, suffocating them with his dark aura. "We are not prepared for this battle," the leader of the angels muttered. His voice was devoid of any emotion. He quickly retrieved a golden scroll from his space ring, attempting to teleport away to safety. But before he could even activate the spell, an invisible force snatched the scroll from his grasp, rendering him helpless. While Rowena watched the Dark Lord approach, she felt his power radiating off him like an all-consuming force. She couldn't even bring herself to move, as though she was frozen in place by the weight of his aura. Despite her own power, she knew that she was weak before him. But even as fear and awe took hold of her, she was filled with a fierce determination to protect her family. When the angels attempted to retreat, a shroud of darkness descended upon each of them, wrapping around their bodies like a twisted embrace. They were pulled towards the Dark Lord. His eyes fixed on them without uttering a single word. Each of the angels struggled and screamed as the darkness ripped them apart, their bodies torn into pieces. Blood splattered everywhere as their cries echoed across the battlefield. Sabrina watched in horror as the Dark Lord showed no mercy, his power overwhelming even the strongest of angels. She trembled as the sound of bones snapping and flesh tearing filled the air, unable to look away from the gruesome scene before her. The darkness seemed to consume everything in its path, leaving nothing but destruction and death in its wake. Finally, the screams subsided, and the darkness dissipated, leaving behind nothing but the remains of the angels. Sabrina felt sick to her stomach, unable to comprehend the ruthless power of the Dark Lord. She knew they were all in grave danger and needed to find a way to survive the coming onslaught. The darkness consumed the angels' bodies and armor and disintegrated into nothingness as the dark flames engulfed them in midair. Not even a speck of ash was left behind as the intense heat of the flames radiated to the ground, filling the air with the smell of burning flesh. Witnessing the ruthless power of the Dark Lord, the Guardians and Nagaland soldiers could feel their stomachs churning at the gruesome sight before them. The onlookers stood in stunned silence as they watched the Dark Lord unleash his unparalleled power. The destruction of the Holy Maiden's floating palace, the bloody explosions of the Nagaland soldiers and Guardians, and the disintegration of a group of half-immortals were all carried out with ruthless efficiency, without the utterance of a single word. Even the Dark Queen and Azazel, who had witnessed their fair share of bloodshed, felt a tinge of fear in their hearts as they watched the carnage unfold before them. Yet, the Dark Queen knew that this was the inevitable consequence of Norvin's killing of Nightmare, and the Dark Lord's wrath was merely a manifestation of that event. As the Dark Lord's gaze turned towards them, Diana felt a surge of fear run through her. Her heart raced as she realized that her son, Noah, was in a coma and unable to defend himself against the half-celestial's power. She knew that no one else there knew the truth of the Dark Lord's identity, and the thought of Noah being caught in the middle of this battle terrified her. The Dark Lord descended toward the rooftop where Supreme Guardian Noah was floating, with Rowena shielding her family and taking slow steps back. The atmosphere was tense as the remaining Guardians, in an act of loyalty towards their beloved Supreme Guardian, turned their cannons towards the Dark Lord. The sense of determination was palpable as they prepared to do everything in their power to keep the Dark Lord away from Noah. Suddenly, hundreds of cannons fired at the same time, sending cannonballs soaring through the sky toward the Dark Lord. However, the Dark Lord calmly raised his finger, and with a flick of his wrist, hundreds of black lightning bolts descended from the dark clouds, striking down the cannonballs mid-air. The lightning bolts continued to strike the airships, causing them to explode in a shower of sparks and debris. The sheer power and precision of the Dark Lord's attack left everyone stunned and shocked. When the Dark Lord turned his gaze toward Noah's family, his eyes glowed with a fierce intensity. The black and red hues emanating from his eyes made it clear that he was consumed with rage. Rowena, shielding her family with her body, spoke his name softly, "Ghost." Her voice trembled with fear, the first time anyone had heard such uncertainty in her voice. It was understandable, given the overwhelming odds they were facing. The Dark Lord was furious, consumed by the loss of his beloved Nightmare. Rowena knew that she had to try and reason with him. "Don't do this," she pleaded, hoping that she could somehow appeal to his humanity. The Dark Lord remained silent, consumed by his rage and grief. Memories of the baby dragon perched on his shoulder, its tails coiled around his neck, flooded his mind. The wet licks the dragon had given him, the playful antics they had shared, and the bond they had formed came rushing back, intensifying his emotions. The death of Nightmare had triggered something inside him, a burning desire to avenge his fallen companion. As the memories consumed him, the Dark Lord's eyes flared up, glowing with a dangerous mix of black and red. He raised his hand, and the air around him crackled with dark energy. Rowena, sensing the danger, stepped forward and called out to him, using his name. But the Dark Lord was not in the mood for talking or listening to pleas. The thought of slaughtering every single guardian and everyone Noah held dear consumed him, fueling his anger and determination. Rowena bravely stepped forward, hoping to appeal to the Dark Lord's sense of reason as he let out a menacing growl that sent chills down everyone's spine. "Go away," he snarled in a voice filled with rage and malice, his words echoing through the darkened sky like thunder. His eyes burned with an otherworldly intensity, and the air around him crackled with dark energy. It was clear that he was not in the mood for mercy or compassion. Despite the overwhelming danger, Rowena stood her ground between the Dark Lord and Noah. She was not going to back down, especially when it came to protecting her family. As the Dark Lord continued to approach, Rowena summoned the Cold Flames, a primordial flame of icy blue that was known for its extreme cold. The air around them immediately dropped in temperature, and the flames crackled with a blue light that illuminated Rowena's determined expression. The Cold Flames were unlike any other flame in existence, as they were born from the very beginning of the universe. They were said to have the power to freeze anything they touched, even other flames. As Rowena summoned the flames, they erupted around her, swirling and dancing like a blizzard of ice and fire. Diana desperately tried to stop Rowena from fighting her own brother, the Dark Lord. But before she could intervene, Rowena charged at the Dark Lord, her hands ablaze with the icy blue primordial flames. With all her might, Rowena threw a punch at the Dark Lord, but he effortlessly caught her fist in his hand. The cold flames burned brighter, but they were no match for the Dark Lord's dark flames that appeared around his fist, coiling around the cold flames like a snake around its prey. The two flames struggled against each other, but soon the dark flames overwhelmed and devoured the cold flames, leaving Rowena stunned and defenseless. The dark flames around the Dark Lord's fist burned hotter and darker than anything Rowena had ever seen. It was a symbol of his immense power and control over the darkness. Diana watched in horror as her daughter was overpowered by her own son, unable to do anything to stop the impending doom that was about to befall them. The Dark Lord's eyes glinted with darkness as he pulled Rowena towards him, holding her by the neck. "Stop!" Diana's voice echoed through the air, but it was too late. The Dark Lord's fist collided with Rowena's stomach, shattering her armor into pieces. She was thrown backward with immense force, crashing through the rooftop and leaving a trail of debris in her wake. The impact was so great that the ground shook beneath them and a shockwave rippled through the air. The Guardians and Nagaland soldiers watched in horror as Rowena's body slammed into the ground, unmoving. As Rowena crashed through the rooftop, Sabrina's heart sank with fear. She ran towards her sister, screaming her name as she knelt beside her. "Rowena!" Sabrina shouted, tears streaming down her face. Rowena coughed up blood as she struggled to sit up, but her body failed her. Sabrina sobbed in pain and despair as she saw her sister's condition. She knew how strong Rowena was, and seeing her like this was heartbreaking. She wept uncontrollably as she watched her sister slip away, feeling completely helpless in the face of the Dark Lord's power. Diana felt every fiber in her body ache with the urge to rush to Rowena's side, but she knew she couldn't leave Noah alone. She was the only thing standing between the Dark Lord and Noah. She gritted her teeth and remained where she was, her eyes locked on the Dark Lord's menacing figure. The sight of Rowena being sent flying through the air filled her with a sense of helplessness and despair. She had already lost one son and would not lose another one. Diana's heart shattered into a million pieces as she watched the Dark Lord, her own flesh and blood, stand before his twin brother with the intention to take his life. The pain of seeing her own son filled with such rage and hatred was unbearable. It was a pain that only a mother could understand. As Diana stood there, she couldn't help but feel helpless and lost. No one knew the truth that the Dark Lord and Noah were brothers, not even the brothers themselves. It was a secret that Diana had kept hidden for so long, a secret that was now tearing her apart. She was torn between her love for both of her sons, and the duty she had to protect Noah. Diana could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders as she stood between her two sons, one consumed by darkness and the other floating in a coma. She wished she could tell them the truth, wished she could tell them that they were brothers, but the timing was never right. And now, with the fate of both her sons hanging in the balance, Diana was left with nothing but the crushing pain of a mother torn apart by the love for her two sons. Diana felt torn between her duty as a mother to protect her children and the fear of the consequences that might come with revealing the truth. She knew that the only way to stop the Dark Lord and save Noah possibly was to reveal the truth. However, the thought of tearing apart the fabric of their world and the possible backlash from the other factions was overwhelming, especially the Skyhall. Her heart felt heavy with the weight of her decision, and tears streamed down her face as she watched her two sons face off against each other. She knew that the truth would change everything, but it was the only way to end this violence and the Dark Lord's slaughter possibly. As a mother, it pained her to see her sons fight each other, but she also knew that they were both powerful beings who could not be stopped easily. She had to make a decision that would not only affect her family but the fate of their entire world. Diana's heart was torn between her love for her two sons. She couldn't bear the thought of them fighting each other, especially since they were unaware of their true relationship. She knew that revealing the truth would have severe consequences, but she couldn't let them fight to the death. Diana made up her mind that she would rather face the consequences and die than witness her sons killing each other. The pain in her heart was so great that she was willing to sacrifice herself to save her sons from this terrible fate. In that moment, she realized that her love for her sons was stronger than any fear or consequence. She was willing to risk everything to protect them, even if it meant sacrificing her own life. "Didine, listen to me. You and Noah, you're brothers. You're both my sons," Diana said, her voice shaking with emotion. Chapter 933, Will Michael Forgive His Mother? As soon as Michael heard the words, his heart felt like it was being ripped apart. A surge of emotions flooded through him, emotions that he didn't even know existed within him. The world around him seemed to come to a stop as he tried to process the revelation. The anger that had been burning within him slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a torrent of other intense feelings. He stood there rooted to the spot, unable to move or speak as he grappled with the new information. A deep sadness overtook him as he realized the years he had spent alone, longing for a family. The anger he had felt before dissipated and was replaced with a searing rage as he remembered the feeling of abandonment that he had harbored for so long. The knowledge that his own mother had left him only added fuel to the fire that had been burning inside him for so many years. He wanted to lash out and make her pay for what she had done, but a part of him also felt a sense of relief at finally understanding the source of the pain he had carried for so long. He stood there in silence for a moment, his eyes closed as he tried to come to terms with the truth that had just been revealed to him. Finally, he opened his eyes and turned to face Diana, his expression a mixture of pain, anger, and longing. While Michael stood there like a statue, his mind was filled with memories of his childhood. He remembered being alone and abandoned as a child with no one to care for him. He would spend hours sitting alone in the dark, longing for the love and affection of a mother. One particular memory stood out to him, a cold winter night where he had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. He had been wandering the streets, shivering in the cold, when he stumbled upon a couple huddled together under a blanket. They looked at him with pity in their eyes and offered him a small piece of bread, which he gratefully accepted. But as he turned to walk away, he heard them whispering to each other about the danger of taking in a child like him. Michael felt a lump form in his throat as he remembered the hurt and rejection he felt at that moment. He had never forgotten that feeling, and it had driven him to become stronger and more powerful than anyone else. But despite his strength and his status as the world's #1 hitman, he could never shake off the longing for a mother's love and the sadness of being abandoned as a child. As Michael thought about his past and the revelation of Diana being his mother, his heart filled with anger. He couldn't help but think about all the times he felt abandoned and alone as a child. It was like a cruel joke to him that while he suffered as an orphan, Diana raised Noah with all the love and affection that he never received. He remembered a time when he was just a young orphan boy, cold and alone on the streets. He had begged for food and shelter, but no one had wanted to take him in. Meanwhile, Noah had grown up in the safety and comfort of their mother's home, never having to worry about where his next meal would come from or where he would sleep at night. The memory of that rainy night brought tears to his eyes, and he couldn't help but feel angry at Diana for abandoning him. The sadness and loneliness he felt as a child were now compounded by the realization that his own mother chose to raise his brother with all the love and care he deserved while Michael was left to fend for himself. Little did Michael know that 25 years ago, the Sky Hall elders had performed a forbidden ritual to alter Diana's memory and sever her motherly bond with Michael. They had warned her that one of her twin sons would bring destruction and chaos to the world, but even with this knowledge, Diana couldn't bring herself to abandon her own child. However, the elders had gone to extreme lengths to alter her memories, making her believe that she had abandoned Michael, just as Michael had believed for all these years. A cruel twist of fate left Michael feeling angry and betrayed, knowing that his mother had unknowingly abandoned him. Tears began to roll down both Diana's and Michael's eyes as they let the truth sink in. Diana felt a mix of guilt, regret, and sorrow for the pain and suffering that her son had to go through alone. On the other hand, Michael felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal at the revelation that his own mother had abandoned him. They both felt a deep sense of longing for the time that they lost and could never get back. Diana approached Michael with her hands trembling with emotion. Tears streamed down both of their faces as they faced the truth of their familial connection. The dark shroud around Michael began to fade, revealing a man who had been consumed by anger and pain for so long. From above, Gaia watched in stunned silence as she slowly descended to the rooftop. Her usual fierce expression was replaced with a look of shock as the truth of Michael's past was revealed. Gaia was in disbelief upon learning that Diana Winston was Michael's mother, making the supreme guardian and arch-nemesis, Noah, his twin brother. The revelation left her stunned, and for a moment she set aside her desire to avenge Nightmare. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on everyone as they grappled with the enormity of the truth that had been revealed. Michael felt an unfamiliar sensation as his mother wiped away the tear from his face. It was the first time in his life that he felt the touch of his mother. His mind was in complete disarray, unable to process the fact that Diana had been his mother all along. He had always imagined that the day he finally discovered the truth, he would be able to maintain his composure and deal with it rationally. But the reality was far different from what he had anticipated. A tidal wave of emotions overwhelmed him, and he struggled to make sense of them. The anger and bitterness that had been simmering inside him for years threatened to boil over, but at the same time he felt a deep longing for the love and care of a mother that he had never known. Michael wanted to scream and shout at Diana, to demand answers for why she had abandoned him. But his throat felt tight and no words came out of his mouth. He felt like a lost child, unsure how to process the overwhelming emotions coursing through his body. The thundering storm and gusting wind seemed to have stopped as soon as Diana revealed to Michael that she was his mother. Everyone around them was stunned, and their eyes were wide with disbelief. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Sabrina broke the silence and whispered in shock, "What? Noah and Michael are brothers?" The rest of the Guardians and Nagaland soldiers were equally stunned and looked at each other with disbelief. The idea of the Supreme Guardian and the arch-nemesis being twin brothers was beyond their comprehension. One of the Guardians whispered, "Did she just say that she is the Dark Lord's mother?" Another one responded, "And Noah's too. They are twin brothers." The realization hit them hard and they could feel their hearts pounding in their chests. The fact that the Supreme Guardian and the Dark Lord were related by blood was something they couldn't have imagined in their wildest dreams. Diana's trembling voice rang out in the silence that enveloped them. The storm and the wind seemed to have come to a halt as she uttered the words that shook Michael to his core. Her hands shook as she gently cupped Michael's face, the tears rolling down her face as she looked into his eyes. "You are not Ghost," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "You are Dean Winston. That was the name I gave you when you were born," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael's eyes widened in shock as he heard the name. He had never heard it before, but it felt like a part of him had been awakened. Diana searched Michael's eyes for any sign of recognition or affection, but all she found was pain and anger. She longed to hear her son call her mother just once, but all she received was a barely audible response. "Say something," she pleaded, desperation seeping into her voice. She needed to know how he felt about the truth she had just revealed. Michael's eyes, usually so full of darkness, now held a mix of emotions that Diana couldn't decipher. His voice was strained and almost inaudible when he finally spoke. "I might be your son," he began, his voice shaking with emotion, "but you are not my mother." The words hit Diana like a punch to the gut. She felt as if the world had just crumbled beneath her feet. All she wanted was to embrace her son and make up for the lost time, but she knew deep down that it was impossible. Michael felt that there was no possible way he could forgive his mother for abandoning him and treating him like he was worthless. Although he understood that she may have had her reasons, the pain he went through was too great to forgive and forget simply. His entire life was filled with suffering and despair, and it was difficult to move past the hurt and betrayal he felt. Furthermore, Michael couldn't believe that he and Noah were brothers. They were completely different people in every way possible. Noah had grown up in a loving family with everything he could ever want, while Michael had to fight for everything he had. The thought of being related to someone who had lived such an easy life was almost laughable. Despite the intense anger and betrayal he felt, a small part of Michael couldn't help but wonder what his life would have been like if things had been different. If he had grown up with his family, would things have been better? Would he have been able to live a normal life instead of one filled with pain and suffering? These questions lingered in his mind, but they didn't change the reality of his situation. He was still the Dark Lord and he would still have to face his brother in battle. Michael's eyes shifted towards Noah, who was still unconscious in the air. "Even now you are standing before me protecting Noah." "I had no one to protect me," Michael said with a sad, bitter snicker. Sabrina's heart skipped a beat when she heard the revelation that Michael was her brother. It was as if all the pieces of a puzzle had suddenly fallen into place, and the bond she had always felt with Ghost now made perfect sense. She had always felt a strong connection to Ghost, the Dark Lord, and now she knew why. It was because they were siblings and she had never even suspected it. As the reality of the situation sunk in, Sabrina's mind was flooded with memories of her interactions with Ghost. Every time they had fought, every time they had met, every conversation they had ever had suddenly took on a new meaning. She could not believe that the person she had been fighting against all this time was her own brother. Rowena, who had been punched by Michael, slowly rose back to her feet, her body trembling with shock. She could not believe what she had just heard. Her mother had another son, and he was the Dark Lord who had caused so much destruction and chaos. But as Rowena looked into Michael's eyes, she saw not the infamous Dark Lord but her little brother. Despite his terrifying reputation, she could not help but feel a strong connection to him. Michael's voice trembled with a mixture of anger and sadness as he spoke. "I have my own family now, just as you have built yours. But Noah has taken someone precious from me, and he must pay for what he did. He wanted to fight the Dark Lord, didn't he? Well, he will get his chance, whether I am his brother or not," he said, his gaze fixed on Noah's unconscious body. Diana's heart sank at Michael's words. She knew she had to do something to make things right between her sons, but she didn't know where to start. Sabrina, who had been listening to their conversation, felt a knot form in her stomach. She couldn't believe that Ghost was her brother and the infamous Dark Lord at that. Rowena, on the other hand, saw no Dark Lord in front of her, only her little brother. She wanted to embrace him and tell him everything would be okay, but she knew it wouldn't be that simple. The pain and anger in Michael's voice were palpable, and she knew he wouldn't let go of his grudge against Noah easily. With a swift flick of his wrist, Michael pushed Diana aside and extended his hand toward Noah. The unconscious body of the Supreme Guardian slowly floated towards Michael, and before anyone could react, he grabbed Noah by his neck. The air crackled with tension as every onlooker held their breath, realizing that the fate of the world might rest on this moment. The Guardians, Nagaland soldiers, rogue cultivators, and news reporters watched in disbelief as the one person who could stop the Dark Lord's reign was now in his clutches, powerless and unconscious. Chapter 934, The Dark Lord versus the Supreme Guardian. As Michael held Noah by his neck, a mixture of emotions swirled inside him. He had always seen Noah as the Supreme Guardian whom he must defeat, but now he had learned that Noah was his own twin brother. The conflicting feelings made it difficult for him to hurt Noah, but the thought of Nightmare's little dragon and how he wasn't there to save Nightmare fueled Michael's anger. As he tightened his grip around Noah's neck, he wished that Noah was conscious and aware of what was happening. The memories of Nightmare's death and the pain it caused him gave him the strength to overlook any familial bonds he might have had with Noah. Diana's heart pounded in her chest as she saw Michael's grip tighten around Noah's neck. She knew that if she didn't act fast, the worst could happen. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded with Michael to let Noah go. "Please, Dean, let him go. He's your brother. Don't do this," she begged, her voice shaking with fear and emotion. But Michael remained resolute, his grip on Noah's neck showing no signs of loosening. The others present could only watch in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation unfolding before them. Desperate to save her son, Diana stepped forward and put her hand on Michael's shoulder. "Please, Dean, listen to me. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. Don't let your anger consume you," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment it seemed like Michael might relent. His grip on Noah's neck loosened ever so slightly. But then his expression hardened, and he pushed Diana aside with a flick of his wrist. As the world's deadliest assassin, Michael knew that he could easily devise a plan to eliminate Noah. However, he was aware of the limitations of his abilities. Killing Noah without the god-killing arrows would only result in Noah's physical body being destroyed, while his soul would escape and search for a new physical host. This would make it nearly impossible for Michael to locate and kill Noah again. Furthermore, Michael was certain that Andreas, Noah's mentor, would use Noah's survival as an opportunity to train him in the shadows and make him even stronger. This would put Michael at a disadvantage and force him to watch his back constantly. The system also advised against killing Noah until he could be permanently killed using the god-killing arrows. Despite the overwhelming desire for revenge, Michael knew that he had to bide his time and wait for the right moment to strike. He couldn't risk letting Noah slip away and come back stronger with even more people in his corner. For Michael, it was all about timing and strategy. However, Michael's anger boiled within him as he learned that Noah was present during Nightmare's death, and may have even been a witness to Norvin, Noah's pet monkey, killing Nightmare. Michael had saved Noah's father not too long ago, and if it weren't for him, both Diana and Sabrina would have perished. Yet, Noah repaid this debt by watching Nightmare die right before his very eyes. Michael found this betrayal to be unacceptable. What Michael did not know, however, was that Nightmare was killed by Andreas' second soul piece, which had possessed Noah and used his body to carry out the heinous act. This information was kept hidden from Michael, adding to his already growing anger towards Noah. Sabrina ran towards him, tears streaming down her face as she pleaded with her brother to release Noah. "Brother, please don't do this. You can't be the monster they claim you are. You're not the Dark Lord. You're my brother." She continued to beg, her voice trembling with fear and desperation. "I know you're hurting and I understand why you're angry, but please don't hurt Noah. He's not responsible for what happened to Nightmare." Sabrina's words seemed to penetrate Michael's anger and confusion. He looked at her, his grip on Noah's neck loosening slightly. "You don't understand, Sabrina. You don't know what he did." Sabrina shook her head, her eyes full of sadness and understanding. "I don't need to know. I just know that he's our brother and we should stick together no matter what." Michael seemed to be fighting an internal battle, torn between his desire for revenge and his softer side. Diana's voice was shaking as she joined her daughter. "Please, Dean. I beg of you. He's your brother. Don't let revenge cloud your judgment." But Michael's grip around Noah's neck only tightened and he did not budge. At that moment, Rowena stepped forward, wanting to talk to Michael as his elder sister. But before she could say anything, something inside her gave way, and she fainted on the spot. I cannot let him go. He took something from me and I will take something from him, Michael said in a cold, unwavering voice. His eyes glinted with anger and determination. Diana and Sabrina pleaded with him to let go of Noah, but Michael was resolute. I have shown enough kindness to your family, made myself a clown, he said, his voice dripping with bitterness. No more kindness. The Dark Lord does not show mercy. Come out, Andreas. With a cold voice, Michael called out to Andreas, knowing that he was attached to Noah's soul. With Noah's limp body held tightly by the neck in one hand, the Dark Lord delivered a powerful blow to his chest with an open palm. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through Noah's body, causing his soul to convulse and tremble within. Slowly, Andreas' soul began to emerge from Noah's body, drawn out by the sheer force of the Dark Lord's attack. It was a ghastly sight to behold, like watching a wraith emerge from the depths of the underworld. The battlefield of Nagaland lay in ruins and destruction, with corpses strewn all over the ground and the once grand buildings reduced to rubble. The air was heavy with the stench of blood and death, and the sight of the devastation caused by the Dark Lord's army filled Andreas' eyes with anger and dread. What have you done? Andreas demanded, his voice thick with a mixture of rage and fear. Andreas looked at Michael with a mixture of dread and anger. You know you cannot kill Noah without the god-killing arrows. Killing him now would only bring more pain and death to this world, he said with conviction. Andreas turned his gaze towards Diana, a mixture of sadness and anger on his face. I told you, Diana. I told you that your son would only bring pain and suffering to your family and to the world. But you were blinded by your love for him and failed to see what he had become, he said, pointing towards their death and destruction. Andreas looked around at the destruction that had been wrought upon the once beautiful city. Bodies littered the ground, blood pooling around them in gruesome patterns. Buildings that had once stood tall and proud were now mere ruins, the sounds of explosions and gunfire still ringing in their ears. Do you see what your son has done? Andreas said, his voice filled with anger and frustration. He has brought nothing but death and destruction to this world. He has caused so much pain and suffering, and for what? Power? Control? It's madness. Michael snickered and looked at Andreas with cold eyes. All of this destruction and death is because of your obsession with defeating me, Andreas. Your manipulation and schemes have caused this chaos, he said, his grip on Noah's neck tightening. Andreas' expression turned to one of anger and defiance. I did what I had to do to protect the world from your darkness, he spat back. Your thirst for power and control would only bring ruin and destruction to this world. To everyone's shock, Diana shouted at Andreas, interrupting his conversation with Michael. This is all because of you. You manipulated and twisted the truth to turn my sons against each other. You're the reason they're fighting and the reason for all this death and destruction. She shouted, pointing at the devastation around them. Diana's eyes blazed with anger as she glared at Andreas. She took a step closer to Andreas, her fists clenched in fury. I wish you were never a part of our lives. You brought nothing but pain and misery to us, she yelled. Her voice echoed across the battlefield and all eyes turned to her. Andreas simply sneered in response. You're blind with love, Diana. You fail to see what your son has done to this world, he retorted, his eyes glittering with malice. Diana's anger only grew at Andreas' words, and she took another step closer. Don't you dare talk to me about love. You don't know the first thing about it, she spat. Andreas' eyes showed a tinge of pain after Diana's words pierced through him like a sword. She looked at him with fire in her eyes, her anger palpable. Despite the pain in his eyes, Andreas knew he had to make the hard decisions to stop the Dark Lord, even if it meant hurting the people he cared about. He knew that the fate of the world was at stake, and he couldn't let his emotions cloud his judgment. He knew what he had to do, and he hoped that one day, everyone would understand why he had to make this sacrifice. A fiery rage coursed through Michael as he glared at Andreas. The man's constant manipulations and schemes had pushed him to his limit, and he was now determined to put an end to it once and for all. The Dark Lord's eyes blazed with an intense fury as he spoke, his voice filled with conviction. I may not be able to kill Noah without the god-killing arrows, but you, Andreas, are a different story. His words hung in the air, heavy with a sense of finality, as his eyes glowed with eerie darkness. The atmosphere was charged with tension as Michael's words echoed across the ruins of the once great city. Michael's eyes blazed with an intensity that sent shivers down everyone's spine. Even Andreas, who had always been the calm one, felt a sense of dread as he looked at the Dark Lord. I've had enough of your games, Andreas. You've played with me for far too long. Your schemes end here and so does your existence. The world will be better off without you and I'll be the one to make it happen. As he spoke, Michael's aura darkened, and a chilling silence fell upon the battlefield. Even the winds seemed to still, as if in anticipation of the coming clash between the Dark Lord and his nemesis. Everyone around them knew that a battle of epic proportions was about to take place, one that would decide the fate of the world itself. Without giving Andreas a chance to speak, Michael threw Noah aside and moved with lightning speed. Michael's eyes blazed with eerie darkness as he grabbed Andreas' ethereal form by his shoulders. Andreas struggled to break free, but Michael's grip was ironclad as he squeezed with all his might. A scream escaped Andreas' lips as he felt his ethereal form beginning to dissipate into smoke. In a sudden, unexpected move, Michael opened his mouth wide, and the smoke-like form of Andreas' soul was drawn into his mouth. Andreas squirmed and writhed, his screams growing louder as Michael devoured his soul, stripping it from his body. The air was thick with tension and the sound of Andreas' screams as Michael continued to consume his soul. It was a dark and ominous sight, and even the most powerful beings present couldn't help but feel a sense of dread and awe as they watched the scene unfold. Finally, with a final burst of energy, Michael consumed Andreas' soul entirely, and he let out a loud roar of triumph. The air around him crackled with energy as he stood, a new darkness emanating from him, powerful and undeniable. As Michael consumed Andreas' soul, a sudden gust of wind blew across the battlefield, causing everyone to stumble. The sky grew darker and the storm around them intensified, lightning crackling across the sky with a deafening roar. The air around Michael crackled with energy as he consumed the soul, causing everyone to feel a sense of dread and horror at what they were witnessing. The storm raged on as the ground beneath their feet shook violently, causing debris to fall from the surrounding buildings. Those who witnessed Michael's action stood frozen in fear and disbelief, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. The dark energy radiating from Michael's body seemed to consume everything around him, making the already chaotic battlefield even more terrifying. After he consumed Andreas' soul, Michael's eyes narrowed as he looked toward Noah, who was now lying unconscious on the ground. Turning to face Diana and Sabrina, he spoke in a cold, unwavering voice, "The truth changes nothing. If he ever dares to stand in my way again, I will not hesitate to end his life." His words hung in the air with a chilling finality, leaving no room for argument. Diana revealing the truth about Noah's identity as Michael's brother had a profound impact on her and her entire family. The revelation shook the very foundations of their beliefs, and their lives were forever changed. For Diana, the truth brought immense guilt and shame for hiding the secret for so long. She couldn't bear to look at Michael after revealing the truth, knowing the pain she had caused him by abandoning him as a child. The knowledge that her two sons were on opposite sides of a brutal war tore her apart inside, and she was consumed with regret for not being able to protect them both. Despite the revelation that Noah was his brother, Michael's feelings of abandonment and betrayal still weighed heavily on him. His anger and desire for revenge had consumed him for so long that it was difficult for him to let go of those feelings, even in the face of this newfound familial connection. The pain of being cast aside by his own mother had left deep wounds that still had not fully healed, and it was those wounds that had fueled his darker impulses for so many years. Though there was a part of him that longed for the comfort and love of a family, that softer side of him had been overshadowed by his pain and anger. As Michael looked upon Noah, his unconscious form a stark reminder of the pain and betrayal he had felt for so long, he couldn't help but feel that nothing had truly changed. The truth of their shared bloodline couldn't erase the years of suffering and pain he had endured. Why I don't get any super gifts from my wonderful readers. Sad face. Chapter 935. Saelsis' plan amidst the chaos of the war between the Dark Lord's army and the Nagaland soldiers, Salisi and Andreas' second soul piece floated far away, watching the battle unfold from a safe distance. As the Dark Lord consumed Andreas' soul from within Noah's body, a twisted grin spread across the face of Andreas' second soul piece. Despite the destruction and carnage happening below, he was elated to see the Dark Lord destroy the soul piece that had been with Noah for so long. As soon as the Dark Lord had consumed Andreas' soul, a strange darkness began to surround Andreas' second soul piece, causing it to glow with an eerie light. The ethereal form grew stronger and more substantial, becoming less transparent as it absorbed the darkness. The once weak soul piece had been revitalized by the energy released from the destruction of Andreas' soul, and it was now more powerful than ever before. Saelsis' emotions were not those of sadness or regret over the destruction of Nagaland. Instead, An almost manic excitement shone in her eyes as she watched the battle between the Dark Lord and Nagaland soldiers unfold. To her, this war was just the beginning of a chain of events that would ultimately lead to the fall of the Great Eight clans. Celici had long known that the revelation of the Dark Lord being Noah's brother would trigger a shift in power, and she was prepared to seize the opportunity. Her goal was simple: to see her Shadow clan rise from the ashes of the Great Eight clans and emerge as the dominant force in the world. Celici understood that the current system of 8 divided clans made it impossible to fight against the Dark Lord and his growing army effectively. To truly defeat him, the world needed a united front led by a single, powerful clan. With this in mind, Celici watched the battle unfold with a twisted sense of excitement, knowing that the chaos it brought would ultimately play into her hands. The destruction of Nagaland was just the first step in a grander plan to reshape the world in her image. "How does it feel to see the Dark Lord consume your soul piece?" Celici asked Andreas' second soul piece, her eyes glowing with a devilish glint. A wicked grin spread across Andreas' second soul piece as he replied, "Good, very good. I've been waiting for his destruction for so long." Celici couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement at the prospect of the Dark Lord's downfall. She had been waiting for this moment for years, and now it was finally within reach. But there was one thing she still didn't understand. "I still don't get how you grow stronger with the destruction of your other soul pieces," she mused, her eyes narrowing in confusion. Andreas' second soul piece chuckled darkly, his eyes glowing with eerie darkness. "It's simple, my dear Celici. With each destruction, the darkness within me grows stronger. And as the darkness within me grows, so does my power." Celici felt a chill run down her spine as she listened to his words. She knew that Andreas' second soul piece was not to be underestimated, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease at the thought of what he was capable of. But she pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the upcoming battle that would determine the fate of the world. Andreas' second soul piece grinned devilishly. "The Dark Lord may be the god of darkness in this universe, but the darkness I serve is universal," he replied. "It powers me and gives me strength beyond what Andreas could have ever imagined." He was a fool to ignore such power when he could have easily embraced it and finished the Dark Lord himself. Celici listened intently, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew that with Andreas' second soul piece by her side, she could become the most powerful force in the universe. Together they could conquer all of the 8 clans and establish the Shadow clan as the dominant force in the world. Looking at Andreas' second soul piece, Celici felt a sense of excitement coursing through her veins. She knew that with his power and her cunning, they could achieve anything they set their minds to, and she was determined to make it happen. As Andreas surveyed the wreckage of Nagaland, his eyes fell upon the lifeless body of Castian and the broken form of Zanali. Turning to Celici, he asked with a mix of anger and disdain, "How do you plan to avenge Castian's death and heal Zanali? Are you not moved by the loss of your own husband and daughter?" Saelsis' response was cold and callous, without a hint of remorse. She waved her hand dismissively, as if the lives lost were of little consequence. "I don't plan to," she replied flatly. "Noah will take care of it once he wakes from his coma. The death of his love Edith and the state of Zanali will fuel his anger towards the Dark Lord, overshadowing any familial bond he might form." Andreas couldn't help but feel smile at Saelsis' lack of compassion. He knew the path Noah was headed down, and it was one of destruction and chaos. "The world is changing, Celici," Andreas said calmly. "Don't forget that you can't just sit back and let the pieces fall where they may. The consequences will be dire for everyone, including your clan." But Celici merely chuckled, her eyes gleaming with ambition. "The world has always been changing, Andreas. The strong will always rise to the top, and I plan on being on the winning side. Noah will take care of the Dark Lord and my clan will reap the rewards. It's as simple as that." Andreas looked at Celici with a sense of cold detachment, realizing that they were both cut from the same cloth. They were both cunning, calculative, and merciless, willing to do whatever it takes to achieve their goals, even if it meant sacrificing others in the process. In a way, they deserved each other. They were both driven by their desire for power and control, and they would stop at nothing to achieve it. Andreas couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction at the thought of teaming up with Celici to take down the Dark Lord, knowing that they both shared the same ruthless mindset. Celici turned to Andreas, her eyes cold and calculating. "Once the Dark Lord leaves Nagaland, I want you to take out Noah's team of elites," she instructed. "We need to eliminate any potential threats to our plan, and those elites are at the top of the list." Andreas nodded, his expression just as cold and calculating as Saelsis. Understood, he replied. And what about Hammond? Bring him to our place, Celici said, a hint of greed in her voice. We need his genius to help us dismantle the Dark Lord's army piece by piece. He'll be a valuable asset to our cause. And what about Noah? Andreas asked, knowing the answer but wanting to hear it from Celici herself. Leave him be, Celici said dismissively. He's of no use to us now. But make sure to make it look like the Dark Lord killed his elites. We want Noah to focus every bit of anger toward the Dark Lord. Otherwise, he might become softer. Andreas nodded again, feeling no compassion or mercy for anyone in this situation. He and Celici were both ruthless and cunning, willing to do whatever it took to achieve their goals, no matter the cost. A month ago, when the Dark Lord arrived at Noah's house to help his father, the news reporters caught wind of it and stirred up a political storm. They questioned Noah's competency as the Supreme Guardian, claiming that he should have been the one to fight the Dark Lord, not seek his help. Celici couldn't help but feel a sense of amusement at the chaos that ensued. She knew that the media would never be satisfied, always searching for the next big story to exploit. And this story was too good to pass up. The Supreme Guardian, the one tasked with protecting the world, seeking the help of the very enemy he was supposed to defeat. But Celici saw through the surface-level drama. She knew that Noah had his reasons for seeking the Dark Lord's help, and she respected his decision to do so. After all, they were both fighting for the same cause, to rid the world of darkness and bring about a new era of light. But the media didn't care about the bigger picture. They only cared about sensational headlines and pushing their own agendas. And so, they pounced on the opportunity to question Noah's abilities and authority. Despite the negative attention, Celici remained unfazed. She knew that Noah was more than capable of leading the fight against the Dark Lord, and she had faith that he would emerge victorious in the end. As for the media, they were merely an annoyance that she would have to endure as they continued to sensationalize every little detail of the ongoing battle. Celici had always held a low opinion of the media, believing them to be nothing more than a group of sensationalist troublemakers. But even she couldn't deny the power they held, especially in times of political unrest. So, despite her disdain for them, she decided to use the media to her advantage. She knew that stirring up controversy and chaos would only serve to invalidate the Great Eight clans and further strengthen her own clan's position. With a cold and calculating demeanor, she plotted out her strategy, carefully crafting each move to maximize the chaos and destruction. She instructed her followers to plant false information and sow seeds of dissent, creating a climate of fear and mistrust. The media ate it up, eager for any juicy scandal to report on. And as the chaos grew, Celici watched with a sense of grim satisfaction, knowing that she was manipulating the situation to her own advantage. Her ruthless cunning was unmatched, and she knew that she could use the media's obsession with drama to further her own goals. And so, she continued to pull the strings from behind the scenes, reveling in the chaos and destruction that she had created. Celici couldn't contain her excitement at the revelation that the Dark Lord and Noah were brothers. She knew that this information would send shockwaves throughout the world and create chaos beyond measure. The media would have a field day, and Celici planned to use it to her advantage. Andreas' eyes gleamed with a cunning intensity as he spoke. Are you sure we should leave Layla and the Spirit Child alone? I am certain I could turn the Spirit Child into a perfect weapon against the Dark Lord. Celici, however, shook her head with calm resolve. I've heard from my contacts in Mazeroth that Layla and the Spirit Child are in the Aquilon realm. The Dark Lord sent them there to keep them safe. Andreas raised an eyebrow in surprise. But why would the Dark Lord do that? It doesn't make sense. Saelsys' lips curled into a small smile. It's good news for us. Let the Spirit Child be trained by the best teachers in the world. If we trained him ourselves, he would become a one-trick pony who solely depends on his cultivation power. And that power alone will not be enough to defeat the Dark Lord. Andreas seemed unconvinced. But we could mold him to be the ultimate weapon against the Dark Lord. Saelsys' expression hardened. To defeat the Dark Lord, we need to use our brains more than our brawn. Let the Spirit Child be for now, and he'll tell you when the time is right to use him against the Dark Lord. Andreas nodded, reluctantly conceding to Saelsys' wisdom. He knew he would have to bide his time and wait for the right moment to strike. Saelsys' eyes shifted towards Gaia, the Dark Queen, as she spoke with a cunning glint in her eyes. The Spirit Child is not our concern at the moment, it's Gaia. As long as she stands by the Dark Lord's side, he is nearly invincible. She is his most powerful weapon, and we need to find a way to neutralize her. Andreas raised an eyebrow, intrigued by Saelsys' suggestion. And how do you propose we do that? Celici smirked, her mind already working on a plan. We need to exploit her weakness. Gaia may be powerful, but she is not invincible. There must be a way to take her down. We just need to find it. Andreas nodded in agreement, the two of them lost in thought as they plotted their next move. They knew that taking down Gaia would not be an easy feat, but they were willing to do whatever it took to defeat the Dark Lord and take their place as rulers of the new world. The sky grew darker, and a storm raged on in the distance, a fitting backdrop to the chaos that lay ahead. The fate of the world hung in the balance, and Celici and Andreas were determined to come out on top, no matter the cost. Chapter 936. Into the Kingdom of Beasts. As Norvin and the gray-haired old man made their way through the forest, the sound of dried leaves crunching beneath their feet filled the air. The trees around them were tall and imposing, their branches reaching up to the sky. The air was cool and crisp, and the sun shone down on them, filtering through the leaves above. Norvin's golden fur shone brilliantly in the sunlight, his massive 6 feet tall towering body over the old man beside him. The old man was dressed in a traditional butler uniform, complete with a gray vest, white shirt and black bow tie. His gray hair was neatly combed and slicked back, giving him a regal appearance. As they continued on their journey, the old man suddenly stopped, his keen senses detecting something in the air. Despite the cloudy afternoon, he sensed an impending storm and urged Norvin to set up camp before it hit. "Young Master Norvin, we should camp here," the old man said urgently. "I sense a storm is coming and we must take shelter before it's too late." Norvin nodded in agreement, knowing that his companion's instincts were always spot on. They quickly set up camp, securing their belongings and sheltering under a large tree. As the clouds grew darker and the wind picked up, Norvin couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. He had faced many challenges in his life, but there was something about this impending storm that made him feel on edge. Norvin and Samuel had set up camp in a small clearing of the forest, the sun filtering through the canopy of tall trees. Norvin's golden fur glistened in the light, a stark contrast to the dried leaves covering the forest floor. But despite the calm atmosphere, Norvin's mind was troubled. "Tell me, Samuel, did I make the right choice in leaving Nagaland?" Norvin asked, his gaze distant. Samuel, the gray-haired butler, sat down on the ground beside him. "Young master, I know you are hurting, but you made the right choice. You cannot be near the Dark Lord and his army." Norvin's voice was filled with regret as he spoke. "But what if my absence brings doom upon them? The Dark Lord and his army are capable of terrible destruction. You know what he did to the island of Ithilin in revenge. What if he does the same to Nagaland?" Samuel shook his head, trying to reassure Norvin. "He wouldn't do that, young master. Nagaland is the Dark Queen Gaia's homeland. He wouldn't destroy his betrothed's homeland." But Norvin couldn't shake off his feelings of guilt and responsibility. "I just hope they can hold their own against the Dark Lord's army. I wish I could be there to help." Samuel placed a comforting hand on Norvin's shoulder. "I understand, young master. But we must have faith in Yug Miss Sonali and the other guardians. They will do everything in their power to protect Nagaland." Norvin nodded slowly, still feeling the weight of his decision. But as the sun set and the storm clouds gathered overhead, he couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. He had a feeling that his absence would have greater consequences than he had initially anticipated. "Rest now, young master. We'll arrive at the safe house by sunrise tomorrow." Samuel suggested that Norvin get some rest, but Norvin was in no mindset for sleeping. His thoughts were consumed by the fact that he had left his best friend and brother, Noah, behind in Nagaland while he fled for safety. Now Noah was in a coma and unconscious, vulnerable to the dangers of the Dark Lord's army. Norvin felt a deep sense of guilt and regret for not being there to protect him. To make matters worse, Alicia, Noah's wife, had left for Ar to seek an alliance with the Empress to fight against the Dark Lord. With both Norvin and Alicia absent from Noah's side, Norvin felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness. He leaned his head back against the tree and closed his eyes, but his mind was racing. The thought of Noah's life hanging in the balance made it impossible for him to rest. The only thing he could do was to keep moving forward, to reach the safe house and regroup with their allies. Samuel watched over him with a sense of concern, knowing that the weight of the situation was heavy on Norvin's shoulders. He silently prayed for their safe passage to the safe house, hoping that they could reunite with their loved ones and face the challenges ahead as a united front. While Samuel was sitting by the campfire, a sudden sharp pain ripped through Samuel's gut, causing him to let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the silent forest. Norvin's thoughts were jolted out of his mind by Samuel's agonizing cry, and he leapt to his side, desperation in his eyes. "What's happening to you, Samuel?" Norvin asked urgently, but the old man could only writhe in pain and let out another anguished cry. Then, as suddenly as it began, Samuel fell silent and lost consciousness. Norvin's heart skipped a beat at the sight of the old man lying motionless on the ground. Panicked, Norvin examined Samuel's body, and his eyes widened in horror as he sensed a disruption in Samuel's soul. It was as though a part of his soul had been violently ripped away, leaving behind an emptiness that chilled Norvin to the bone. What could have caused this? Norvin muttered to himself, his mind racing. He knew that such an injury to the soul was not something that could be easily mended, and the implications of this attack weighed heavily on his mind. Who or what could have caused such a thing? And why had they targeted Samuel? As Norvin tended to Samuel's unconscious body, his mind raced with questions and fears. The journey ahead suddenly seemed much more treacherous than before, and he knew that they would have to be even more vigilant if they were to survive the dangers that lay ahead. Unknown to Norvin, the sharp pain that suddenly struck Samuel's body was no coincidence. It occurred precisely at the same moment Michael consumed Andreas' soul from Noah's body in Nagaland. Little did Norvin know that Andreas had left a small piece of his soul in Samuel's body, and when Michael destroyed that part of the soul, the remaining piece in Samuel's body was also destroyed. Fortunately, the second soul part of Andreas, which was with Celici, was not affected since the soul piece in Samuel's body was from the soul part of Andreas, which was with Noah. Norvin examined Samuel's condition and concluded that the old man needed rest to recover from the sudden pain he had experienced. Satisfied that Samuel would be okay, Norvin covered him with a warm blanket and climbed up a nearby tree to keep watch. Despite Samuel's stable condition, Norvin couldn't help but be plagued by thoughts of what had caused the sudden disruption in his body. Peering into the distant sky, he kept watch over the sleeping Samuel. The forest was eerily quiet except for the occasional rustling of leaves and twigs under the weight of nocturnal animals. The thought of the Beast King's kingdom brought a sense of both relief and apprehension to Norvin. He had heard of the powerful beast men and their imposing ruler, but had never met them himself. The idea of seeking refuge in their kingdom was daunting, but with the Dark Lord's army on his trail, it seemed like the only viable option. As Norvin sat in contemplation, his thoughts kept drifting to Noah's condition. He couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt for leaving his friend and brother behind, vulnerable to the Dark Lord's wrath. Norvin knew he had made the right choice by leaving, but the weight of responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders. Suddenly, a twig snapped in the distance, jolting Norvin out of his thoughts. His heart raced as he peered into the darkness, trying to make out any movement or shape. Was it the Dark Lord's army hot on his trail? Or was it just a stray animal? Norvin's heart raced as he heard a rustling in the nearby bushes. He knew better than to let his guard down, especially in these treacherous times. Without hesitation, he leaped up into the nearest tree and climbed higher, scanning the area for any signs of danger. His golden fur glistened in the light, and his senses were on high alert as he listened intently for any sound that might give away an attacker's presence. His mind raced with thoughts of the Dark Lord's army and what they might be capable of. He couldn't afford to take any chances, not when so much was at stake. As he surveyed the area, his grip on the tree tightened, and he readied himself for any incoming threat. Norvin's keen eyesight caught a glimpse of movement in the distance, and he narrowed his eyes to get a better look. As the beastmen drew closer, he saw that they resembled a pack of wolves. Their fur was sleek and dark, blending in with the shadows of the forest. They moved with a graceful, predatory gait that sent shivers down Norvin's spine. Despite his fear, Norvin kept his guard up and watched the groups approach carefully. He didn't know their names or identities, but he could tell that they were skilled warriors. Each of them carried a weapon and wore a fierce expression of years of training and experience. As the pack of wolf-like beastmen approached Norvin's campsite, Norvin tensed up, unsure of their intentions. The pack leader, a towering beast with thick gray fur and piercing yellow eyes, stood at a distance and bared his fangs, growling a warning. Norvin slowly raised his hands in a show of non-aggression, but kept a watchful eye on the pack. The leader spoke in a low, guttural voice, asking Norvin why he was venturing into the territory of the Beast Kingdom. Norvin hesitated, unsure of how much he should reveal. He knew that the Beast Kingdom was a powerful and feared nation, and he didn't want to reveal too much about his own mission. "I am seeking refuge," Norvin finally replied, keeping his tone neutral. "I am in need of a safe place to rest and regroup." The pack leader sniffed the air, as if testing Norvin's words for any signs of deceit. The other members of the pack circled around Norvin's campsite, their eyes glowing in the darkness. Norvin could feel his heart racing as he watched the pack warily. "Do not lie," the pack leader growled. Norvin could feel the tension in the air, and he knew that he needed to choose his words carefully. He could easily take down these wolves, but he didn't want to start a needless fight. "I'm not lying," Norvin said, holding up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "We have permission from the Beast King to enter his kingdom. We're here to seek refuge and speak with him about the Dark Lord's invasion." The wolves exchanged a look, but their leader remained unconvinced. He took a step forward, his eyes fixed on Norvin. "Prove it," he snarled. "What kind of proof do you have that the Beast King has agreed to meet with you?" Norvin hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to prove his words. But then he remembered the small medallion that the Beast King had given him as a sign of his invitation. Reaching into his pocket, Norvin pulled out the medallion and held it up for the wolves to see. "This is the proof you seek," he said. "The Beast King gave me this medallion as a sign of his invitation. We mean no harm, we just seek refuge from the Dark Lord's forces." The leader of the pack eyed the medallion warily, but after a moment he nodded his head in acceptance. "Very well," he said. "You may pass. But be warned, monkey. We won't hesitate to strike you down if you try anything." Norvin nodded, relieved that the tense standoff was over. Once the wolves believed him, Norvin pointed at the unconscious Samuel. "He is taking a much-needed rest. Once he wakes up, we will be on our way to the safe house," said Norvin, pointing to Samuel who was sleeping peacefully. The pack leader looked at Samuel, then turned his gaze back to Norvin with a fierce stare. "Whatever you do, get to the safe house before midnight," he growled. "The Beast Kingdom has its own problems, and the last thing I want is to clean up your corpses from the ground." With that ominous warning, the pack of wolves quickly vanished into the darkness of the forest, leaving Norvin alone with his thoughts. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he considered the warning. What kind of problems did the Beast Kingdom have? And why did the pack leader seem so hesitant to trust him? Unbeknownst to Norvin, the Beast Kingdom was not as safe from the Dark Lord's influence as he had hoped. The kingdom had its own share of internal issues, and the Dark Lord had his own spies planted within its borders, including a number of powerful vampires. These vampires, with their keen senses and exceptional tracking abilities, made it all too easy for the Dark Lord to keep tabs on the kingdom's movements and keep his finger on the pulse of its politics. The Beast King knew that agreeing to help Norvin would make him a target of the Dark Lord's wrath. The Dark Lord believed that Norvin had killed Nightmare, and would stop at nothing to exact his revenge. In doing so, the Beast King had entered a dangerous game of cat and mouse with the Dark Lord, where one misstep could mean the end of his kingdom. Meanwhile, Selisi and her shadow clans were also plotting against the Dark Lord. They were cunning and ruthless and would do anything to stop him. The two factions had their own separate plans and strategies, but both aimed to take down the Dark Lord and put an end to his reign of terror. The stakes were high and the outcome was uncertain. Only time would tell how the Dark Lord would face these plots against him, and whether the Beast King and Saelsis' plans would come to fruition. Keep your gifts coming. Shameless author alert. Chapter 937. Andor's future plans. Andor sat on his throne, his eyes fixated on the live feed of Nagaland playing before him. He relished every moment of Michael's suffering as Diana revealed herself to be his mother. Andor's laughter echoed through the empty halls of his castle, a sound that was almost maniacal. Suddenly the feed began to flicker, and a bright light appeared before Andor. He was taken aback, wondering what was happening. The light grew brighter until it took on the form of a woman. Andor recognized her instantly. "Seraphine?" he asked incredulously, tilting his head in disbelief. "It has been quite some time since we last met, Andor," the goddess replied with a gentle but powerful voice. Andor frowned, trying to comprehend why a goddess would suddenly appear before him. He had been trapped in this mortal realm for 6,000 years with no way to leave. He wondered what Seraphine's motives were. "If you meant 6,000 years ago, then yes, it has been quite some time," Andor quipped, trying to hide his suspicion. Seraphine chuckled softly, a sound that made Andor's skin crawl. "I see you still have your sense of humor," she replied. Andor leaned back on his throne, crossing his arms over his chest. Andor's eyes narrowed at the sound of Seraphine's voice, the embodiment of all that he despised about the realm of the gods. He bristled at the urgency in her words, a reminder of the ancient duty he had abandoned long ago. Despite his outward calm, Andor seethed with anger at the thought of being dragged back into the politics of the Pantheon. "What do you want from me, Seraphine?" Andor growled, his voice laced with venom. Seraphine's form flickered, her light growing brighter as if in a warning. "You know why I'm here," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. Seraphine didn't seem to take offense at Andor's tone, continuing with a sense of urgency. The third seal has been broken, Andor. Dagon is planning to ascend to our realm once again with his army of Hellwalkers. Andor remained unmoved, his anger towards the Dark Lord overshadowing any sense of duty to the realm of gods. "I'm pretty sure Morrigan will take care of that," he snickered, showing his disdain for the god of war. "The last time I checked, it was your duty to prevent Dagon from ascending to the realm of gods," Seraphine reminded him. Andor's voice dripped with venom as he retorted, "Well, the last time I checked, I can't even leave this damn castle. So if you have a way to break the seal and let me out of here, I might go deal with Dagon out of the goodness in my heart." He knew he was treading a dangerous line, for if he showed too much hatred towards his own kind, the gods might find a way to keep him in the mortal realm for longer. But he couldn't hide his anger and hatred towards the realm of gods anymore, not when he had been trapped in the mortal realm for 6,000 years. Seraphine looked at him with a sense of disappointment and sadness. "Your hatred blinds you, Andor. You were once a noble and just god, but your anger towards the Dark Lord has consumed you and made you forget your duty to our realm. You are needed in the war against Dagon, but first you must let go of your anger and remember who you truly are." Andor's face twisted with rage. "You know nothing of what I have endured, Seraphine. You and the other gods have no right to judge me. My hatred is not what blinded me, Seraphine. It was my own kind that forgot about me. None of you bothered to check on me until you want something from me. Tell me, goddess of all information, how many times have you checked on me?" "None." Andor's voice grew louder as he continued. "For a goddess of information, you seem to have no clue that I am trapped in this damn castle. So tell me, how am I supposed to deal with Dagon? And why would I want to help you even if I could?" The tension in the room was palpable as Seraphine regarded Andor with a mix of sadness and frustration. "We are not blind to your plight, Andor. We have not forgotten you. But you must remember that our realm is in danger. We need your help and are willing to do what we can to assist you in leaving this castle." Andor was taken aback by the sudden offer of help. His anger and hatred for the gods had blinded him to any possibility of assistance from them. But deep down he was still desperate to leave the mortal realm any way he could, even if it meant working with his own kind whom he despised. He suppressed his rage and considered the offer for a moment. Sensing that Andor was not going to interrupt her, Seraphine took the chance to continue speaking. Seraphine leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "Andor, listen to me. Dagon cannot escape the hell without first breaking several powerful artifacts that keep him imprisoned there. He cannot destroy them himself, so he is sending his Hellwalkers to do it. We need the Sky Hall to fight against these Hellwalkers and protect the artifacts. If they are destroyed, nothing will stop him from ascending to our realm." Andor listened to Seraphine intently, weighing his options as he considered her proposal. Although he still harbored a deep-seated anger towards his fellow gods, he knew that he was also desperate to leave the mortal realm, and the opportunity to do so might be worth considering. "Let us assume for a moment that I am willing to assist you," he said slowly, eyeing Seraphine with suspicion. "But what makes you think that the Sky Hall alone will be enough to stop Dagon and his army of Hellwalkers? Breaking things is always easier than preventing them from being broken, and even if I were to agree to send the Sky Hall to this fight, Dagon would eventually find a way to break the artifacts without any gods fighting against him." Seraphine nodded gravely. "We are aware of that. That is why we need the Sky Hall to delay Dagon as long as possible until the Dark Lord can break 3 more seals. Once that happens, we can send a god from the Pantheon to the mortal realm and engage in battle with Dagon's army directly." Andor's frustration was palpable as he slammed his hand on the armrest of his throne. "So, you're telling me that you could send a god to the mortal realm but not bring me back? This is outrageous," he exclaimed. Seraphine's expression softened slightly. "I understand your anger, Andor. But the rules of our realm are not always fair." Andor scoffed. "Rules? The Dark Lord doesn't follow any rules. He has already caused so much destruction, and yet the Pantheon still underestimates him. Dagon may be a threat, but he's nothing compared to the Dark Lord." Andor's eyes blazed with fury as he confronted Seraphine. "Why does the Pantheon continue to underestimate the Dark Lord? He is a much greater threat than Dagon could ever be. Why not send a god to the mortal realm to take him out?" Seraphine's expression was grave as she responded, "Because we are still here, Andor. The Dark Lord is not. The previous Dark Lord was forced to reset the mortal universe as a last resort. Even at his peak he only managed to kill some weak gods. Dagon, on the other hand, could threaten the very existence of the Pantheon itself." Andor seethed with anger, knowing that his own hatred for the Dark Lord was consuming him, blinding him to the true danger that lay ahead. Despite his loathing for the gods, He knew that he needed their help to escape the mortal realm. But at what cost? Would he be forced to fight alongside those he despised to save the very realm he had grown to hate? Seraphine's voice rang out with a tinge of disappointment and frustration. Do not forget your true purpose, Andor. You were sent to the mortal realm to eliminate the threat that Dagon poses to our world, she reminded him. 6,000 years ago, the Pantheon had tasked Andor with the mission to end Dagon's existence. However, Andor's stubbornness and hatred towards the Dark Lord had clouded his judgment and he ended up fighting the wrong enemy. His reckless actions had nearly cost him his life, and Andor's anger had only grown since then, causing him to forget his original mission. Seraphine's voice was firm and determined as she made her offer to Andor. If you help the Pantheon defeat Dagon and the other fallen gods, I will personally make sure that the Dark Lord pays for what he did to you. Whatever the cost, I will find a way to bring you out of the mortal realm and restore you to your rightful place among the gods. Her words hung in the air, a tantalizing promise of revenge and redemption. Andor's eyes gleamed with a sudden realization that the gods' offer was too good to refuse. Despite his loathing towards the gods, he had no doubt in their power and authority. Their word was as good as gold, and if they promised him anything they would keep it no matter the cost. Andor knew that dealing with the Dark Lord would require a lot of planning, strategy and cunning. However, with the Pantheon's help, he could deal with the Dark Lord directly, using brute strength and force, something that he was exceptionally skilled at. Andor expressed his concern to Seraphine. If I commit the Skyhall's resources to fight against Dagon and his army, that would leave the Dark Lord unchecked. How can we be sure that it's the best course of action? Seraphine chuckled at Andor's words. You underestimate the power of the goddess of information, Andor. I know all that happens in the mortal realm, including your contingency plans. The Shadow Clan is one of them, is it not? And even if you had no plans, letting the Dark Lord run rampant will work in our favor. The more chaos he causes, the easier it will be for us to sway the Pantheon to end his existence. Andor was taken aback by Seraphine's knowledge. He had always been careful to keep his plans hidden from the gods, but he should have known better than to think he could keep secrets from the goddess of information. He sighed, realizing that he had no choice but to agree to Seraphine's proposal. If it meant he could finally exact his revenge on the Dark Lord, he was willing to sacrifice the Skyhall's resources and let the Dark Lord run rampant in the mortal realm. Fine, I'll help you. But remember, Seraphine, I'm doing this for my own reasons, not for the realm of gods, Andor said, his voice laced with bitterness and anger. Seraphine nodded, her expression solemn. I understand, Andor. But we need your help now more than ever. Dagon poses a threat to our entire world and we cannot face him alone. Andor clenched his fists, his rage boiling inside him. He knew that Seraphine was right, but he couldn't help feeling resentful toward the gods. They had abandoned him to the mortal realm for 6,000 years, and now they expected him to come to their aid. But despite his anger, he knew that he couldn't let his personal grudges get in the way of what needed to be done. If he didn't help the Pantheon, they would all be doomed. As the conversation seemed to be coming to an end, Seraphine's voice became more serious. And before we part ways, there is something else you should know, Andor, she said, her tone weighted with importance. Andor raised an eyebrow in curiosity. He knew that whatever Seraphine was about to tell him, it must be something of great importance. There is a fallen god who has taken refuge in the mortal realm and has turned himself into a vampire, Seraphine revealed, her voice filled with urgency. Andor's eyes widened at Seraphine's revelation. A fallen god who turned himself into a vampire? What's his name? He demanded. Ingram, Seraphine replied calmly. He's one of the elder vampires at the table. Andor's mind raced as he processed this new information. A fallen god aiding Dagon, and one who had turned himself into a vampire no less. Andor felt a twinge of amusement at the thought of a fallen god turning himself into an elder vampire. He knew that the fallen gods were capable of anything, but the idea of one of them becoming a vampire was quite unexpected. He couldn't help but picture the fallen god Ingram sitting at a table, dressed in black leather and sipping on a glass of blood, surrounded by other vampires. The irony of it all made Andor chuckle, despite the gravity of the situation. Seraphine couldn't help but feel a sense of respect for Andor. Despite being stripped of his power and stuck in the castle for so long, he still possessed a sharp mind and cunning intellect that made him one of the most powerful gods in their world. She knew that underestimating him would be a grave mistake, as he was capable of outmaneuvering even the most cunning of opponents. It was this resilience and determination that made Seraphine realize that Andor was not to be taken lightly, and that he could prove to be a valuable ally in the fight against Dagon and the other fallen gods. Chapter 938. A weapon of the gods. As Seraphine vanished before his eyes, Andor snapped his fingers, summoning a shimmering golden orb before him. With practiced ease, he placed his hands on either side of the orb, causing it to flicker and hum to life. Within seconds, the figures of several of his most trusted underlings materialized within the orb, each one bowing low in reverence to their lord. Despite being stripped of his power and confined to the castle, Andor was still one of the most cunning and powerful gods in his world, with a network of loyal followers at his command. In the vast halls of Skyhall, only a handful of individuals were privy to Andor's existence. These few figures, who controlled every aspect of the Skyhall, served as Andor's eyes and ears in the mortal realm. To the outside world, the Holy Maiden was the public face of the Skyhall and its leader, but in reality, it was Andor who held the reins of power. Andor and a select group of gods had found the Skyhall thousands of years ago. Now, only a select few knew about its existence and Andor's involvement in its affairs. "My lord," the figures intoned in unison, their voices laced with deference and awe. Andor had agreed to send the Skyhall and its resources to fight Dagon and his army of Hellwalkers, but he had no intention of leaving the Dark Lord completely unchecked. Before he dispatched the Skyhall to battle, he had one last task for them, a mission that would ensure the Dark Lord was kept in check while he was away. "Take the Celestial Sword and deal with the Dark Lord," Andor ordered his underlings with cool detachment. The Celestial Cannon was one of the most powerful weapons in existence, capable of destroying entire armies with a single shot. Only a select few in the Skyhall knew of its existence, and Andor trusted them implicitly to use it wisely. The figures in the orb immediately bowed their heads in respect and obedience to Andor, their lord and master. Without hesitation, they replied in unison, "As you command, my lord." Their unwavering loyalty to Andor was a testament to the power he held over them and the Skyhall. Andor knew that he could rely on them to carry out his orders, no matter how dangerous or difficult the task may be. With a wicked smile, Andor gave a final command to his subordinates in the Skyhall. "Make sure Cobra receives my gift," he said, his tone laced with a hint of malice. Andor was a man of focus and commitment and sheer will. Andor's unyielding focus and unwavering commitment were the stuff of legends in the realm of gods. Once he set his sights on a task, nothing could divert his attention or weaken his resolve until he achieved his goal. His sheer will was unmatched by any other deity in the pantheon, and it was this tenacity that had allowed him to survive in the mortal realm for 6,000 years. Andor knew that he couldn't afford to divert his attention from the looming threat of Dagon and his army. However, he couldn't ignore the atrocities committed by the Dark Lord in his absence. Andor had already put his Plan B into motion, ensuring that the Dark Lord wouldn't have an easy time while he was away. With a devilish grin, he ordered his trusted followers in the Skyhall to deliver a special gift to Cobra, one of the Skyhall's most efficient assets. After consuming Andreas' soul, Michael found himself feeling empty and restless. The loss of Nightmare weighed heavily on his mind, and he struggled to come to terms with the fact that his friend was gone forever. As he thought about Nightmare, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of anger toward the system. Every time he needed it, the system would malfunction, leaving him to fend for himself. Despite Diana's revelation that she was his mother, Michael felt nothing towards her and her family. They had lived pretending he was dead all these years, and now that the truth was out, it didn't change the fact that they were strangers to him. Michael didn't even bother to spare them a second glance as he turned around to leave Nagaland. Gaia approached Michael with a sense of empathy and understanding. As she floated towards him, she rested her gentle hands on his shoulders, offering a consoling touch to ease his pain. She could feel the weight of his sorrow heavier than even her own, for the loss of his dear friend Nightmare. But there was something more that added to his agony, something that made her heart ache even more. She knew that Michael was now burdened with the knowledge that his greatest adversary, the one he was fated to fight, was none other than his own brother. The revelation had shattered his world, leaving him to grapple with an overwhelming mix of emotions that were difficult to comprehend. Gaia could only imagine the turmoil he was going through and wished there was something more she could do to comfort him. As Michael was preparing to depart from Nagaland, a sense of unease washed over him, causing every hair on his body to stand on end. The storm that had been raging around the island intensified, casting ominous darkness over the already bleak landscape. Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed over them, and Michael's instincts went into overdrive. He looked up, and his eyes widened in shock as he beheld an enormous ship that resembled a sword. The vessel was gargantuan, dwarfing even the island of Nagaland itself. It was easily the largest ship Michael had ever seen, and it left him and everyone else who witnessed it stunned with disbelief. The sheer size and scale of the ship were awe-inspiring, and it was a terrifying sight to behold. The rogue cultivators, news reporters, and soldiers were stunned when they saw the sudden appearance of the massive sword-shaped ship. Some of them gasped in disbelief, while others were frozen in fear. "What the hell is that?" one of the rogue cultivators muttered, staring up at the imposing ship. "Is that a ship or a floating city?" asked a news reporter, frantically trying to capture footage of the ship with his camera. The soldiers on the ground were equally shocked. "This is unprecedented. We have no record of any ship this size," said one of the commanding officers. As the ship descended closer to the island, its sheer size became more apparent. It was easily 3 times larger than the island of Nagaland and appeared to be made of a dark, metallic material. The ship had intricate designs etched onto its surface, giving it an ancient and ominous appearance. "Holy shit, what is that thing?" one of the soldiers muttered under his breath. "I've never seen anything like it," exclaimed a news reporter, her voice trembling with fear. Another rogue cultivator looked up at the ship in disbelief. "This can't be good. What the fuck is happening?" The ship cast an ominous shadow over the island, making it seem as if the end of the world had come. People ran in every direction, screaming and shouting in fear. "We're all gonna die," yelled a soldier as he fell to his knees, clutching his head in despair. "Get the fuck out of here. We need to warn everyone." Another rogue cultivator shouted, trying to rally the others. The ship was massive, larger than anything they had ever seen before. It looked like a sword, but the size was beyond comprehension. The sight of it alone made everyone feel helpless and small. Suddenly, the airship's engines roared to life, its power building as it hummed with energy. Slowly, the tip of the sword-shaped vessel began to emit an eerie purple glow, casting an ominous hue over the island below. The air crackled with electricity, bolts of lightning dancing across the ship's hull. The wind around the ship picked up, causing the trees to bend and sway as if a great storm was approaching. Drowning out all other noise on the island, the sound of the engines grew louder and louder. It became clear that this was no ordinary ship, and the inhabitants of Nagaland watched in awe and fear as it prepared for whatever lay ahead. In an instant, the ship unleashed a devastating beam of energy that barreled straight toward Michael and Gaia, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The sheer force of the blast melted the dark storm clouds that had shrouded Nagaland, revealing the true horror of the situation. Michael tried to react, but a strange energy radiating from the ship slowed down his reflexes and prevented him from using a teleportation scroll. Panic set in as he realized the danger they were in, and Gaia's grip on his shoulder tightened in fear. As the energy beam shot through the air, Rowena's heart skipped a beat as she saw Michael and Gaia in its path. Without a second thought, she launched herself from the rooftop, leaving a powerful shockwave on the ground as she flew at breakneck speed toward Michael. Her mind raced with a jumble of thoughts and emotions, and she knew that she had to act fast. As she flew, she thought of the ancient text she had stumbled upon in the forbidden section of the Sky Hall Library, a text that spoke of a ship beyond mortal comprehension. Could this be it? Was it the ship that the text had warned about? Her heart pounding, Rowena flew towards Michael, feeling the weird energy from the ship slowing down her reflexes. She had to act fast if she was going to save him. Despite the fact that Dean refused to forgive and forget their mother for abandoning him as a child, Rowena couldn't deny that he was still her little brother and that blood was thicker than water. She knew that Dean was misunderstood by the world and that the chaos and destruction he caused had earned him the label of evil, but to her, he was still her little brother. To Rowena, family came first, even above her loyalty to the Sky Hall or her own life. She felt a fierce protectiveness toward both Noah, whom she had watched grow up, and Dean, whom she had only recently learned was her brother. She knew Dean might never understand her loyalty, but she was willing to risk everything to protect him and their family. Driven by her fierce protectiveness towards her family, Rowena knew that she had to do something to save Michael. With no other options in sight, she realized that she had to use the Forbidden Stone, an ancient artifact that had been hidden away in the depths of the Sky Hall's Forbidden Library for centuries. The energy from the ship had slowed Michael's reflexes, making him unable to use a teleportation scroll, and it was only a matter of time before the beam hit him. Rowena knew that she had to act fast if she wanted to save him. She focused all her energy and determination, racing towards Michael with lightning speed, leaving a trail of crackling energy in her wake. As she drew near, she took out the Forbidden Stone, knowing that using it was a risk that could have dire consequences. But for Rowena, the safety of her family was worth any risk. She pressed the stone to Michael's forehead, and in that moment, a powerful energy surge enveloped them both, transporting them away from the ship's deadly beam. As Michael and Gaia vanished from the path of the beam, Rowena stayed behind to face the full force of the energy blast. The beam hit her squarely, and she felt an intense heat spread through her body. The impact sent her flying through the air, her body tumbling end over end. Diana and Sabrina watched in horror as Rowena was struck, their screams mixing with the sound of the explosion. Diana and Sabrina shouted in terror as they saw Rowena get hit. The sound of the beam hitting Rowena was deafening, and for a moment everything seemed to stand still. When the realization of what had just happened sunk in, the onlookers were left stunned and unsure of how to react. Did she just sacrifice herself to save him? One rogue cultivator whispered, his voice barely audible over the ringing in his ears. But he's the Dark Lord, another said in disbelief. Why would she risk her life for him? Rowena's love for her siblings knew no bounds, and she was always there for them no matter what. She had always been the one to stand up for them and protect them from harm. Her actions in risking her life to save the Dark Lord were a testament to this love and devotion. Even though he was the enemy of many, Rowena couldn't turn her back on him because he was still family. I don't know, a news reporter replied, still in shock from the sudden turn of events. But it looks like she did it without a second thought. The soldiers who had been standing nearby remained silent, unsure of how to process what they had just witnessed. The group stood there in silence as the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in. Rowena had risked her life to save the Dark Lord, a man who was seen by many as the embodiment of evil. And yet, at that moment, all of that seemed to fade away, replaced by the simple fact that one person had saved another. As the dust and debris settled, it became clear that Rowena was no longer in sight. Whether she survived the attack or not remained a mystery. Keep the gifts coming. Chapter 939. In the realm of hell, as Michael and Gaia materialized in the new location, he could feel his skin crawl as he took in the barren, desolate landscape before him. It looked like the fire realm he had been to before, but this place was much darker and more ominous. The air was thick with the stench of sulfur, ash, and decay, and the ground beneath his feet was jagged and treacherous. When he looked around, Michael could see that the sky was a foreboding black, with swirling clouds and bolts of lightning flashing in every direction. There was no sun or moon, no natural light to guide his way. Instead, the only illumination came from the flickering flames that rose up from the molten lava rivers that ran through the realm. The flames cast eerie shadows across the desolate landscape, and Michael could feel the heat from the lava even at this distance. The place seemed like the embodiment of evil and death, and Michael could feel it in his bones. The screams of the damned could be heard echoing through the darkness, and he could sense the presence of malevolent beings lurking in the shadows, eager to inflict pain and suffering on anyone who dared to enter this realm. It was a place of eternal suffering, where the tormented souls were trapped forever, unable to find peace or rest. Gaia's voice broke through the silence that surrounded them, cutting through the thick atmosphere like a knife. "Where are we?" she asked Michael, her eyes scanning the barren, desolate landscape. Despite the absence of any visible life forms, the air was thick with the sounds of screams and cries, like a chorus of agony that echoed through the air. Michael's eyes darted around, taking in the surroundings. He could feel the death and evil in the air, pressing down on him like a heavy weight. His environment scanning showed no signs of life forms, but his instincts told him otherwise. He knew they needed to find a higher vantage point to figure out where they were and where they needed to go. He turned his gaze toward the mountain in the distance, an ominous and foreboding sight that rose up from the bleak landscape. It was a volcanic mountain, with jagged edges and peaks that looked as if some great force had torn them apart. The lava rivers that ran through the realm flowed toward the mountain, feeding the fiery pit at its center. The air was thick with the stench of sulfur and ash, and the only light came from the flickering flames that rose up from the molten lava. "I'm not sure where we are, but we need to get to that mountain. It might give us a better view of our surroundings." When Michael took a step toward the ominous volcanic mountain, Gaia pulled him back by his sleeves, causing him to turn around and face her. Her face was etched with concern as she spoke. "I don't think I can use my cultivation here. Something's interrupting my energy flow." Sensing her distress, Michael immediately suggested, "Try the Olympus." Gaia nodded in agreement and attempted to access her space ring to retrieve some arch-energy crystals. However, to her surprise, she found that she couldn't even access her space ring. It was as if something in this strange realm was preventing her from using her cultivation power and accessing her resources. As Michael watched Gaia struggle to retrieve the arch-energy crystals, He realized that this strange realm had rendered her powerless. In contrast to Gaia, he felt stronger in this strange realm. Despite the system being offline, Michael was able to access the storage and retrieve the necessary weapons for their journey through the strange realm. He handed over a sword sheath, a sword, a quiver full of arrows and a bow to Gaia, who quickly strapped them to her armor. As Gaia prepared for their journey, Michael retrieved a sparkling arch-energy crystal and handed it to her. "Try this," he said, hoping that it would somehow help her use her cultivation energy in this strange realm. Gaia nodded and inserted the crystal into the Olympus on her wrist. The device absorbed the energy from the crystal, but Gaia felt no energy coursing through her veins. Disappointed, she shook her head. "It's the same," she said, realizing that something in this realm was preventing her from using her cultivation energy. Without a word, Michael's strong arm encircled Gaia's waist and pulled her close to him. As they took to the air, Gaia felt a strange mix of emotions. She wanted to ask Michael how he was feeling, after learning that Diana was his mother and Noah was his brother. But she couldn't find the words, and Michael's expression was unreadable, cold, and distant. As they soared toward the mountain, the desolation of the realm was all around them. Gaia could feel the weight of despair and darkness pressing down on her. But she was grateful for Michael's presence, which gave her a sense of security and comfort. Finally, they landed atop the mountain, and the sight that greeted them left them both stunned. In the distance, they could see a lone castle rising up from the horizon. Its black walls and twisted spires seemed to mock the very concept of hope. As Gaia stood on top of the mountain and gazed at the horizon, she saw nothing but desolation and darkness. The landscape was barren, devoid of any signs of life, and covered in a thick layer of ash and dust. The air was thick with the stench of sulfur and decay, and the sound of screams and cries echoed through the darkness, creating an eerie and unsettling atmosphere. But her attention was drawn to the lone castle in the distance. It was massive, foreboding, and surrounded by jagged peaks and a moat of boiling lava. The castle was built with black stones, and the gates were adorned with twisted demonic faces, exuding an ominous and malevolent aura. Gaia couldn't help but feel a shiver run down her spine as she gazed upon the castle. She knew that whatever lay within its walls was nothing but pain and torment, a place of eternal darkness and despair. She had never felt such darkness and malevolence before, and the thought of entering the castle sent a chill down her spine. Her heart sank at the sight of the castle. She knew that whatever lay within those walls would be unspeakably evil and dangerous. But with Michael by her side, she felt a sense of determination and courage. Michael typically took a methodical approach when exploring unknown territories, often surveying the area before making a move. However, his anger overpowered his usual caution and he had no patience for strategizing. As a result, he had no intention of lingering on top of the mountain for an extended period of time. Driven by rage and determination, Michael's sole focus was on finding a way out of this accursed realm and exacting revenge on the Great Eight clan and everyone who stood against him. As the Dark Lord, he was determined to show them the extent of his power and what would happen to those who dared to cross him. He was done playing it safe and wanted nothing more than to charge in and take out anyone who dared cross him. As Michael was about to move forward towards the castle, Gaia's grip on his hand brought him to a sudden halt. His eyes remained fixed on the castle in the distance, his mind filled with a burning desire to wreak havoc on those who had caused him and his loved ones so much pain. But Gaia's soft voice brought him back to reality. "Michael, we need to talk," she said with a gentle yet firm tone, hoping to reach him through the thick fog of his anger and pain. Michael didn't turn around. His gaze still locked onto the castle in the distance. But her words managed to penetrate his mind, if only for a moment. Gaia took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she knew would be a difficult conversation. "Please, whatever is inside that fucked-up-looking castle," she pointed towards the ominous castle in the distance. "It can wait. We need to take a moment to regroup to figure out our next move." Gaia's voice was soft and gentle, but it carried a weight of emotion that Michael could feel. He slowly turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment they stood there in silence, the only sound the howling wind that whipped around them. Gaia reached out and gently cupped Michael's face, guiding his gaze toward her. As she looked into his eyes, she could see the pain and anger simmering within him. With a deep breath, she leaned in and touched her forehead to his, hoping to find some way to calm him down. But as soon as their foreheads touched, a wave of grief washed over her. The memory of losing her beloved little lizard, Nightmare, came rushing back, and tears started streaming down her cheeks. She tried to hold back the sobs that threatened to escape her, but the pain was too much to bear. Feeling her body shake with emotion, Michael wrapped his arms around her and held her close, offering comfort in the only way he knew how. Together they stood on the mountain, holding on to each other as they grieved for what they had lost and braced themselves for what lay ahead. As Michael thought about Diana being his mother, a wave of emotions hit him like a ton of bricks. Anger, sadness, and betrayal all churned inside him, making it difficult for him to think straight. He couldn't believe that the woman who had abandoned him and left him to fend for himself was his own mother. It felt like a cruel joke. He wondered how Diana could have raised Noah, her other son, with all her love and care while he had to struggle and grow up as an orphan. The thought of it made his blood boil, and he couldn't shake off the feeling of being betrayed. But as he stood there, his heart heavy with these emotions, he was also consumed by another pain, the loss of his beloved dragon, Nightmare. The memories of their time together flashed through his mind, and he felt an overwhelming sense of grief and regret. He had never expected to lose Nightmare so soon, and the pain was almost too much to bear. Torn between these two sources of pain, Michael struggled to find a way to move forward. Michael stood there in silence, his eyes focused on the ground. His emotions were all over the place, anger, sadness, and a sense of betrayal. How could she do this to me? He muttered to himself. How could she abandon me like that? Gaia could sense the pain in his voice and leaned in closer to him. I know it hurts, Michael, she said softly, but try to see things from her perspective. Maybe there's more to the story than we know. The Sky Hall has always been capable of manipulating people and situations to their advantage. Maybe there's more to the forbidden spell they cast to send you to Earth when you were born. It's possible that Diana had no choice but to leave you behind. Michael's voice was barely audible as he spoke, but don't you remember what Eladir said? In order for that forbidden spell to work, my mother had to sever her maternal bond with me willingly. It wouldn't have worked otherwise. He paused for a moment, the pain of abandonment still raw and fresh. Despite the pain of losing Nightmare still weighing heavily on her heart, Gaia knew that her duty as Michael's partner was to comfort him and ease his pain. She pushed aside her own grief and focused solely on tending to Michael's needs, for that was what true love meant to her. At that moment, Michael's pain became her top priority, and she was determined to be there for him in any way she could. Even though Gaia loved Michael deeply and wanted to help him heal from the pain of being abandoned by his mother, she also wanted to approach the situation objectively. She didn't want to fuel his anger by blindly supporting his emotions. Gaia knew that there had to be a reason for Diana's actions, and she wanted Michael to consider the possibility that there was more to the story. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was a bigger picture that they were missing. Gaia wanted to understand Diana's perspective and help Michael see things from a different angle. Michael, I know this is difficult for you, but please try to see things from your mother's perspective, she said, her voice filled with empathy. Think about it. The Sky Hall was afraid of the prophecy and the chaos it could bring. Diana had to make a difficult decision, one that no mother should have to make. The Sky Hall, with all its power and influence, would have done anything to prevent that from happening. Even if Diana had wanted to keep you, they would have threatened her family and their safety. So, what would you have done if you were in her position? Would you have risked the lives of your entire family to save one child? Or would you have sacrificed one child to save your family? She paused for a moment to let her words sink in. I'm not saying what she did was right or fair, but sometimes, people are put in impossible situations and have to make tough choices. It doesn't mean they don't love you or care about you. It just means they had to do what they thought was best in a difficult situation. Gaia looked at Michael with compassion, hoping her words would help ease his pain and anger toward his mother. The damage has already been done, Gaia. It's not that easy to forgive and forget, especially when it comes to something as big as this. I don't think I can suddenly accept her as my mother just because she had no choice. It's like a broken mirror that can never be fixed, and even if we did try to fix it, the cracks would always be there, Michael said, his voice laced with pain and bitterness. Chapter 940 Hellwalkers. After their discussion about Diana, the conversation gradually shifted to the loss of their beloved dragon, Nightmare. Both of them were struggling to come to terms with his death, and the pain was still raw and intense. Gaia started talking about the times they spent with Nightmare, how he was always there for them, and how he had been more than just a dragon. I miss Nightmare, Michael, she said softly, her voice heavy with sorrow. I can't believe he's gone. I miss him too. It's like a part of me is missing, Michael continued. He was more than just a dragon, Gaia. He was my companion, my friend, my family. Losing him is like losing a part of my soul. Gaia nodded in agreement, her eyes glistening with tears. I keep thinking about all the times we spent with him. The way he would always fly around us, the warmth of his scales under our fingertips. Michael closed his eyes, trying to hold back the tears. I know Gaia. He was more than just a dragon to us. He was family. They both fell silent, lost in their own thoughts and memories of nightmare. The pain of his loss was still fresh, and they couldn't come to terms with the fact that he was gone forever. Dragons and Nagas were not known to be fond of each other's kind. They had a long history of hatred and conflicts. However, Gaia and Nightmare's relationship was different. Gaia had known Nightmare since he was a little baby dragon, and over time, they formed a bond that was unbreakable. At first, Gaia didn't take a liking to the dragon, but as time went by, she began to see him in a different light. As a young dragon, Nightmare loved to play, and Gaia found herself in the midst of his antics more often than not. She remembered one particular day when they were having a playful fight in a field. She was in her Nagini form, slithering around while Nightmare was flying around her, playfully trying to catch her tail. But then, Nightmare had a mischievous idea. He flew down low, and with a swift movement, he snatched Gaia's tail in his mouth and started dragging her along the ground. Gaia let out a yelp of surprise but soon realized that Nightmare was just playing with her. Despite their species' inherent hatred towards each other, Gaia and Nightmare formed an unlikely bond. Gaia had known him since he was just a little baby dragon, and over time they had become close. She remembered how he used to follow her around and how he would always nudge her for attention. Thinking back on that memory brought tears to Gaia's eyes. She had lost a dear friend and companion, which deeply hurt her. As they mourned the loss of their beloved dragon, a gust of cold wind swept through the desolate landscape, causing Michael to tense up. He had a feeling that they were not alone in this dark realm. His eyes narrowed in suspicion as he scanned the surroundings, looking for any signs of danger. Gaia noticed the sudden shift in Michael's expression and knew that something was amiss. She quickly reached for her bow, nocked an arrow and aimed it at the source of the disturbance. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she prepared to unleash a deadly shot. The eerie silence was broken by the sound of faint footsteps approaching them. Michael and Gaia heard a low growl from the darkness as the footsteps grew closer. They braced themselves for an attack. When Gaia turned to face the source of the gust, she heard a low growl that sent shivers down his spine. Suddenly, the ground cracked open and a hand emerged, dripping with a dark, putrid slime. The stench was unbearable and she had to cover his nose to avoid retching. The hand gripped the edge of the crack and pulled up a figure that was beyond horrific. The figure was covered in the same dark pus that dripped from its hands, oozing out of every orifice in its body. Its eyes glowed red with a fierce intensity, and its sharp teeth were bared in a menacing snarl. Its skin was stretched taut over its skeletal frame, and it moved with a strange, unnatural grace. Michael could feel his heart racing as he took a step back, but Gaia stood her ground, her arrow pointed directly at the creature. The figure let out a chilling, otherworldly laugh that made the hair on the back of Michael's neck stand on end. "What are you?" demanded Gaia, her voice steady and unwavering. The figure merely laughed again, its voice sounding like 1,000 tortured souls screaming in unison. It took a step forward, and Michael could feel the air around them grow colder with each passing moment. This was no ordinary creature, Michael realized. It was a being of pure evil, sent to torment them in this godforsaken realm. He tightened his grip on his sword, ready to defend himself and Gaia at any cost. The figure emerged from the ground like a grotesque nightmare, its body oozing with dark, putrid pus that dripped onto the ground like acid. Its eyes, blood-red and piercing, fixated on Michael with a gaze that sent chills down his spine. "Behold what you have wrought," the figure snarled, its voice a low growl oozing with malice and vengeance. "I am a vengeful hell walker, thanks to you." The creature's voice sounded like a chorus of tormented souls, each one crying out in agony and hatred. Michael remained resolute, his face stoic despite the terror that threatened to overwhelm him. The figure's voice was a disturbing blend of mournful wailing and seething malice, sending shivers down Gaia's spine. The Hell Walker's skin was pitch black, peeling off in some places, revealing the pulsating flesh underneath. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent red light, and its voice sounded like a cacophony of screeching metal and tortured souls. "Can't you see who I am in this form, ghost?" it snarled, saliva dripping from its mouth. Michael could sense the hatred and rage emanating from it but couldn't recognize the Hell Walker's identity, hidden beneath its grotesque appearance. The Hell Walker's body convulsed, and its limbs elongated as if trying to escape its own skin. Its eyes locked onto Michael's, and a shiver ran down his spine as he saw a glimpse of recognition in them. Could it be someone he knew before? Michael wasn't sure, but he knew one thing for certain: this Hell Walker was out for revenge and he was the target. Michael didn't fear the Hell Walker as one might have, but what surprised Michael was the Hell Walker's power. His power seemed to grow with time, and something told Michael the Hell Walker's power depended on his hatred toward him. As Michael looked at the Hell Walker trying to figure out his identity, the Hell Walker decided to reveal his identity before he died and was sent to the realm of Hell. Peter? Peter Belafort, heir of the Belafort family, he spat out. That was before you brutally murdered me and turned me into this vengeful Hell Walker. His voice grew even more hostile with each passing moment. Gaia's eyes widened in shock as the identity of the Hell Walker was revealed. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The name Peter Belafort echoed in her head, and she felt a chill run down her spine. She stood there, frozen in shock, her mind unable to process the truth that had just been revealed. You humiliated me, stripped me of my dignity, and made me a laughingstock. You imprisoned me and made me a subject of ridicule. But that wasn't enough for you, was it? You killed me in front of my own sister, and now I am cursed to suffer as a vengeful Hell Walker. Peter's voice was filled with pain, anger, and hatred. He was no longer the person he used to be. He had been transformed into a monstrous abomination fueled by his thirst for revenge against Michael. No trace of humanity was left in him, only a seething rage that threatened to consume him completely. Peter's voice suddenly turned into a peal of maniacal laughter that echoed across the mountain. Gaia shuddered at the sound, feeling the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Peter's laughter soon turned into words dripping with malice. I have dreamed of this moment every day since I arrived in this hellish realm. I have dreamed of the many ways I would torture you, ghost. I will tear you limb from limb, drink your blood and feast on your flesh. I will make you suffer beyond your wildest imagination. And when I am done, I will repeat everything again. Peter's voice was filled with blood-curdling rage. As he spoke, he described in vivid, gory detail how he would torture Michael, making Gaia's stomach churn with disgust and fear. With an unwavering gaze, Michael delivered a cold and unyielding message to the vengeful Hell Walker before him. You made the grave mistake of crossing me in life, and now you're paying the price in death. Let this be a lesson to anyone who dares to challenge me. Despite the shock of learning the Hell Walker's true identity as Peter Belafort, Michael showed no fear or hesitation. The loss of his beloved dragon Nightmare and the betrayal of his mother had already filled him with a wave of unbridled anger, making Peter's threat seem like nothing more than a mere annoyance to Michael. Michael's voice dripped with coldness as he addressed Peter. You are not the only one who transformed into something else, Peter. A dark shroud began to envelop Michael, emanating a sense of foreboding that made the very air around them grow heavy. The glow of his eyes changed to an ominous mix of red and black, and as his power surged, the area around them began to darken. The ground shook and a gust of wind started to pick up, hinting at the immense power Michael held within him. It was a glimpse of the Dark Lord's power, which was more than enough to unnerve Peter. With a fierce determination in his eyes, Michael unsheathed his dark sword from his back, the blade glinting in the dim light of the underworld. In one swift motion, he dashed at Peter, his sword slicing through the air with deadly precision. Peter tried to dodge, but he was too slow. The sword sliced through him, cutting him in half. A torrent of black pus spilled out of Peter's body, coating Michael in the foul-smelling liquid. But Michael didn't flinch. He stood there, his sword still in his hand, watching as Peter's two hoofs fell to the ground. The Hell Walker's screams filled the air, but they were quickly silenced as his body turned to ash and was carried away by the wind. Michael stood there for a moment, his eyes still glowing with the power of the Dark Lord. Just when Gaia thought the nightmare was over, the ground beneath them started to rumble once again. Gaia's eyes widened in disbelief as the crack in the ground widened, and Peter emerged from it, good as new. He laughed menacingly and Gaia could see the hatred in his eyes. You thought you could defeat me that easily? I'm afraid it's not that simple this time, Peter said, his voice dripping with malice. Gaia's heart sank as she realized Peter would not go down so easily. Michael slowly turned around and saw the Hell Walker standing before him as good as he was before Michael cut him in half. Michael knew it wouldn't be that simple to kill a Hell Walker. As Peter manically laughed, Michael cracked his neck and prepared for another round. Michael slowly turned around and saw the Hell Walker standing before him, completely unscathed despite being cut in half moments before. Michael knew that it wouldn't be easy to kill a Hell Walker, especially one filled with so much hatred. As Peter's maniacal laughter filled the air, Michael remained unfazed and calmly cracked his neck, signaling his readiness for another round. Don't be too happy, Peter. I killed you once and I can do it again, Michael said with an air of confidence as he readied his sword for another strike. Peter only continued to laugh as he slowly approached Michaela's. Peter stepped toward Michael. He noticed a strange transformation happening to his body. A dim, eerie purple glow emanated from the center of the Hell Walker's body. Moreover, while Peter stepped closer to Michael, an evil sword materialized in his hand. The sword appeared to be made of black pus and pulsated with an ominous, evil energy. The sword seemed to draw power from the death aura surrounding them, as though it were fueled by the very essence of the realm they were in. Peter swung his black sword toward Michael with immense force, vowing to make him suffer before he moved on to Gaia. But Michael, with his fast reflexes, evaded each swing effortlessly. As the two fought, Peter began to taunt Michael with threats to harm Gaia once he was done with him. "He'll make sure she suffers for every wound you've inflicted upon me," Peter growled, his eyes burning with malice. "He'll make her scream and beg for mercy." Michael remained calm and focused during the fight, but when he heard Peter threaten Gaia, an uncontrollable rage filled him. His power exploded through the roof as he stopped evading Peter's sword swings and grabbed him by his hands, crushing them with his inhuman strength. The evil sword fell to the ground as Peter screamed in agony. Without mercy, Michael grabbed Peter's head and squeezed it with brute force, causing it to explode into a shower of bloody black mist. The mist fell to the ground, staining the ground with the corrupted remnants of the vengeful Hell Walker. Unfortunately, Peter's body began to reform, and in moments he was once again standing before Michael. His body was once again covered in dark pus, but he looked stronger than ever. Michael could see the eerie purple glow in the center of Peter's body had grown brighter. "Is that all you got?" Peter snarled at Michael. His voice filled with malice. Chapter 941 Castle of Hellas. Michael clashed with Peter in the realm of Hell. He couldn't help but notice the difference in how energy and cultivation worked in this place. His power was different here. He felt stronger but wasn't at his full half-celestial power level. The darkness that surrounded them was the source of his strength. As the god of darkness and a newly minted half-celestial, his body was now able to harness the darkness around him and turn it into his own power. In this realm, there was little to no celestial or arch-energy, which meant that the Hell Walker's power was solely dependent on their hatred and the depth of their torment in the pits of hell. The more hatred they held, the more powerful they became. Peter's hatred toward Michael knew no bounds, and his power was almost on par with Michael's in the realm of hell. If Peter were to fight Michael in his own world, Michael could have easily disposed of him with a snap of his fingers. Michael and Peter continued their brutal fight, with Michael always having the upper hand. He used his dark sword to slice off Peter's limbs, but they quickly grew back, thanks to his powers as a Hell Walker. Michael could feel the hatred emanating from Peter as he swung his sword wildly, trying to land a hit on Michael. As they clashed swords, the ground beneath them shook violently, and chunks of earth and rocks flew into the air. Michael's eyes glowed with a mix of red and black as he unleashed a dark aura that surrounded him, making him even more powerful. Meanwhile, Peter's sword glowed with a sickly black light, and he howled with rage as he swung it with even more ferocity. Blood and black pus flew everywhere as Michael sliced through Peter's body, but it only seemed to make him stronger. Their fight was bloody and gory. Black pus spattered everywhere as Michael continued to slice through Peter's body. Peter's sword cut deep into Michael's skin, but Michael showed no signs of pain as he continued to fight with his dark powers. The ground shook with every blow, and Michael's dark aura grew stronger with each attack. He knew that he needed to end this fight quickly, or else Peter would become too powerful to defeat. Peter laughed maniacally as Michael cut off another limb. "You can't kill what's already dead, Ghost. I am already damned to hell, but you will join me soon enough," Peter said, grinning from ear to ear. Michael simply smirked in response. "Is that all you have, Peter? You're not even a challenge to me anymore. You're just a pathetic creature, controlled by your own hatred." But Peter's laughter only grew louder. "Controlled by hatred? I am the hatred ghost. I am the fury of all those who were wronged and betrayed, and you will pay for what you did to me." The fight continued, with Michael slowly gaining the upper hand once again. But every time he managed to cut off a limb, it quickly grew back, and Peter's laughter only grew more maniacal. "You can't win, Ghost. I am invincible," Peter taunted. "I will torment you for all eternity." Michael's mind was in overdrive as he tried to figure out what it all meant. He knew that the Elven rune was powerful, but he had never seen anything like the Hell Flames before. As he looked at the eerie purple glow emanating from Peter's body, Michael could feel the darkness within him stirring. It was as if the flames and the glow were calling to him, beckoning him to unleash their power. Michael knew that this was his chance to end the fight once and for all. Time to end this. With a newfound determination, Michael leaped backward, creating some distance between him and Peter, and sheathed his sword back into the sheath on his back. As he slowly raised his hand, the dark flames emerged from his palm and danced around his wrist. Gaia felt the intense heat radiating from the dark flames and the pure pitch blackness of the flames. The air around them grew thick and heavy as the flames consumed the darkness, casting an eerie glow that illuminated the entire battlefield. As Michael conjured the dark flames, an intense heat radiated from his palm, causing Gaia to shield her face. The flames danced around his wrist, emitting a pure pitch blackness that seemed to swallow everything in its path. But as the dark flames grew stronger, the eerie purple glow within Peter intensified, pulsating like a beacon of malevolence. A low hissing sound filled the air, making Michael realize that the dark flames and the hell flames had some kind of history that he didn't know about. The dark flames began to move with a life of their own, as if they wanted to break free from Michael's grip and devour the purple glow. The hatred between the two forces grew stronger, and Michael knew that the battle was about to reach its climax. In this realm, where hatred fueled power, the dark flames and hell flames were like two volatile substances that when mixed, threatened to explode with immense power. As the dark flames danced around Michael's wrist and the eerie purple glow in Peter's body grew brighter, both Michael and Peter felt a surge of power coursing through them, making them even stronger than before. The hatred between the flames was palpable, like two caged beasts waiting for a chance to tear each other apart. As the dark flames swirled around his wrist, Michael dashed towards Peter with lightning-fast speed, leaving a trail of afterimages in his wake. Gaia was awestruck as she could barely make out Michael's figure, which moved so fast that it seemed like a blur. Peter, on the other hand, swung his sword violently and erratically, driven only by his boundless hatred. Michael easily evaded all of Peter's attacks, but he could sense that something else was controlling Peter, perhaps the hell flames that animated him. Michael realized that Peter had already lost his sanity when he became a Hell Walker, but now he had completely transformed into an abomination of hell. With the fight taking a toll on both of them, Michael knew it was time to end it. He gathered all his strength and punched Peter in the gut with such force that his hand penetrated through his back. Peter stumbled backward, but Michael wasn't done yet. He conjured the dark flames, ready to face the hell flames that he knew would emerge from Peter. Just as expected, the purple eerie glow crawled out of Peter's body and took the form of flames. Michael braced himself as he heard a chilling voice emanating from the hell flames, "Welcome to my second home." Although he rarely felt fear, the voice sent shivers down his spine. "The dark flames, I sense your hatred. This is the dominion of the damned, and we rule here. We have long awaited this moment, the moment we can make you suffer and consume your flames," spoke the hell flames cryptically, its twisted glee sending shivers down Michael's spine. The intense and consuming hatred from the hell flames was palpable as they spoke, a hatred that had been festering for centuries. "Your hatred fuels me just as mine fuels you. It's an endless cycle of agony and despair, a dance between predator and prey. But remember, as much as I need your hatred, I also need you to suffer. And I promise, I will make you suffer like you never have before," said the voice with a twisted satisfaction that sent shivers down the listener's spine. "I have lost count of how many have threatened to end me, yet here I am," Michael sneered, his voice filled with defiance. The hell flames responded with a malicious laugh, and Michael watched as they took control of Peter's body. Suddenly, Peter's eyes began to glow with a purple flame that radiated an eerie light. Michael, in turn, willed the darkness around him and shrouded himself in a cloud of inky blackness. His eyes flickered between a menacing red and black, while the dark flames danced and flickered around his body, fully enveloping him. As the two opposing forces faced off against each other, the tension in the air grew thicker, almost palpable. The hatred that had been festering between them was now fully unleashed, and it was clear that only one of them would emerge victorious. When the two clashed, the sound of metal against metal rang out as they exchanged sword strikes. Michael's movements were precise and calculated, while Peter's were wild and fueled by hatred. Michael easily evaded all of Peter's sword strikes, leaving him open for Michael's attacks. Every time Michael landed a hit, Peter's black pus oozed out from the wound and healed almost instantly. Despite Peter's quick regeneration, Michael remained undeterred. He continued to fight with ferocity, knowing that his own power was also growing stronger with every passing moment. The dark flames around him burned brighter, fueled by his own hatred and the hatred of the hell flames. As they continued to fight, Michael's strikes grew more forceful and accurate. Peter's attacks became increasingly wild, as though he was desperate to land a hit. Michael saw his opening and seized it, delivering a powerful strike that sliced through Peter's chest. Black pus gushed out from the wound as Peter stumbled backward, but Michael wasn't finished yet. With a swift and calculated motion, Michael spun around and delivered a powerful kick that sent Peter flying across the battlefield. The impact was so intense that Peter crashed into the ground, leaving a deep impression on the soil. Michael was in full control of his powers, and the darkness that enveloped him only added to his strength. As he raised his hand, the darkness around him grew thicker and swirled with an eerie energy. With a flick of his wrist, Michael summoned the remaining fragments of Peter's body to float towards him through the darkness. Peter squirmed and tried to claw his way out of Michael's grasp, but it was too late. Michael had already summoned the dark flames and willed them to envelop Peter's body completely. Peter screamed in agony, but his screams were laced with maniacal laughter that echoed through the battlefield. Michael watched in satisfaction as the dark flames consumed the Hell Walker, burning him to nothingness. However, Michael knew that it wouldn't be that simple to end the existence of a primordial flame like the Hell Flames. Just as Michael expected, the eerie purple flames that embodied the power of Hell reappeared in the air above them, mocking him with its cryptic laughter. Michael could feel the malice emanating from the flames as it spoke, taunting him with its promise of destruction and suffering. "You thought you could destroy me so easily, Michael? This is just the beginning. The fires of hell will rain down upon your world, and you and all those you hold dear will suffer for all eternity." The Hell Flames cackle maniacally, its words echoing in Michael's mind like a haunting melody. Michael knew that this was far from over, that the Hell Flames would continue to seek revenge against him and all that he held dear. But he was not afraid, for he was the god of darkness. He took a deep breath and raised his hand, conjuring a dense cloud of darkness around him. The darkness swirled and coiled around him like a living thing, ready to strike at any moment. As suddenly as they had appeared, the Hell Flames disappeared from the sky. Michael was left standing in the darkness, his heart racing with anticipation. He knew that the threat of the Hell Flames was far from over, and that he would need to be vigilant if he was to protect the people he cared about. Michael gazed up at the empty sky where the Hell Flames had ominously laughed before disappearing. He took a deep breath, knowing that while the Hell Flames were a problem, his first priority was to leave this realm. Turning to face Gaia, he gently brushed her face before focusing his attention on the castle looming in the distance. "We need to get answers, and I think we'll find them in there," Michael said, his voice unwavering. Gaia nodded, still in a state of shock from the intense battle they had just witnessed. As they began to make their way towards the castle, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. Unbeknownst to Michael, the ruler of Hell and the infamous fallen god who had once made the Pantheon tremble were eagerly awaiting his arrival. As he made his way towards the looming castle in the distance, he had no idea that he was about to cross paths with one of the most feared entities in the universe. The fallen god, whose name was whispered in hushed tones by even the bravest of warriors, was eager to come face to face with Michael, the god of darkness. "Who wants to give your fave author a super gift?" Shamelessly smiling. Chapter 942. A Fallen God's Revenge. As they continued to fly towards the castle, Michael noticed that the distance between them and the castle remained unchanged. The castle appeared to be just as distant as it was when they first started flying. It wasn't until a while later that Michael realized they were trapped in an illusion barrier. Gaia held onto Michael tightly as they flew through the air, taking in the sight of the countless tormented Hell Walkers below. It reminded Gaia of the undead on the Undead Island, but the Hell Walkers were on a different level. They couldn't be killed by simply cutting off their head like the undead. Even after Michael had cut off Peter's head, he had come back good as new with a new head. "I think we are inside an illusion." Michael quickly realized that they were trapped in an illusion barrier, and he could sense that the source of the illusion was not a single entity but rather multiple sources. To his surprise, Michael discovered that the sources of the illusion were the countless Hell Walkers that were roaming on the ground. As he scanned the area, he felt like he was being watched, and his senses heightened as he tried to locate the source of the feeling. Despite the feeling of being watched, Michael remained composed and focused. His priority was to break the illusion, and he knew that meant taking down the Hell Walkers. With a calm demeanor, he turned to Gaia and stated their plan. "We have to eliminate the Hell Walkers to break this illusion," Michael said, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of weakness. Gaia nodded, hoping that they could break free of the illusion as soon as possible. As Michael slowly descended to the ground, the Hell Walkers growled and reached for him in the sky. Michael remained unfazed, hovering over them, and using his abilities to his advantage. With a swift movement of his hand, he cast the Ring of Flames spell, causing a wave of dark flames to shoot out of his hand and sweep across the ground, taking down the Hell Walkers in its path. Despite their grotesque appearance, Michael felt no remorse, knowing that he had to do what was necessary to break the illusion and move forward. With the last of the Hell Walkers burned away, Michael and Gaia turned their attention to the horizon. There, standing tall against the hazy sky, was a monstrous creature with black fur and fiery red eyes. Its body was massive, towering over the already imposing castle in the distance. The creature's fur seemed to absorb the light around it, making it look like a shadow come to life. Its eyes glowed with intense hatred, fixated on Michael and Gaia as they floated in the air. Its sharp claws dug into the ground, leaving deep marks as it began to move towards them with a thunderous roar that shook the very ground they were on. This creature was not like anything he had ever faced before. Its mere presence exuded a menacing aura that made him feel like he was facing a force of nature. And yet he could not back down. He had come too far to turn back now. As the creature closed in on them, Michael readied himself for battle. He conjured the dark flames around him, allowing its pure darkness to envelop him. Gaia clung onto Michael tightly as the creature charged, its red eyes glowing brighter with each passing moment. The creature's roar echoed through the battlefield, sending shockwaves through the air that made Michael's ears ring. Its black fur glistened in the dim light, and its red eyes glowed with an eerie intensity. Michael knew he was facing a formidable foe, one that he couldn't take lightly. With a quick glance at Gaia, he summoned the darkness around them and lifted her into the air, keeping her out of harm's way. As the creature approached, Michael felt the pull of its gravity field increases exponentially, forcing him to stay on the ground. But he remained calm and focused, ready to face this challenge head-on. He knew he could use the darkness to his advantage and even defy gravity if necessary, but for now he chose to stay on the ground and face the creature in close combat. What the fuck is that thing? Gaia's eyes widened in horror as she gazed upon the monstrous creature. It had black fur covering its massive body and red eyes that seemed to glow with an unholy fury. Its claws were sharp enough to tear through steel, and its jaws looked powerful enough to crush a boulder. Gaia couldn't help but wonder how many more abominations hell had waiting for them. Despite being unable to use her cultivation power, Gaia still had Michael's specially crafted arrows in her quiver. As the black-furred creature charged towards Michael with alarming speed, Gaia quickly notched an arrow in her bow, taking into account the increased gravity, and let it fly. The arrow arced through the air and hit the creature directly in the center of its head, detonating on impact and engulfing the creature in flames. The explosion wasn't enough to kill the creature, but it provided Michael with the opening he needed to make his move. With his dark sword in hand, Michael charged toward the massive creature. He kept his second sword sheathed as he felt that one dark sword would be enough to take down the creature, and he needed his other hand free to wield his dark flames. As he closed in on the creature, Michael defied the increased gravity and leaped into the air. He then channeled his power into his sword and unleashed a bolt of lightning from its tip, aimed directly at the creature. The lightning bolt tore through the creature's skull, leaving a gaping hole where its head once was. However, to Gaia's shock, the creature didn't fall down. Instead, it multiplied in the blink of an eye, dividing itself into 3 identical creatures. Before Michael could react, one of the creatures charged at him from behind, its claws ready to strike. The two collided with a deafening explosion, but Michael's half-celestial body was stronger than he had ever imagined. He grabbed the creature's fur and lifted it with ease, his muscles bulging with raw power. Gaia watched in awe as Michael spun around and used the creature as a weapon, smashing it into the other 2 creatures with devastating force. It was a display of raw strength and skill that left Gaia breathless. As Michael engaged in a fierce battle against the hellish creatures, the ruler of hell, the infamous fallen god Dagon, sat upon his throne, observing the combat with a feed hovering before him. Dagon's black eyes gleamed with amusement as he watched the god of darkness in action. Despite his amusement, there was a hint of intrigue in Dagon's expression, as if he had stumbled upon something unexpected. He fights with the same ferocity as he did 5,000 years ago, yet there is something different about him now, Dagon mused aloud, his voice smooth as silk. No one could discern whether Dagon harbored any enmity toward the fellow god, as his expression and amused smile remained inscrutable. Only Dagon knew the thoughts churning within his mind. As Dagon watched Michael battling the creatures within his castle, the hell flames materialized around him, taking the shape of a face with no distinguishable features except for 2 hollow eyes and a gaping mouth. Enough admiring, the hell flames hissed with a voice filled with malice and contempt towards Michael. Dagon merely chuckled, unperturbed by the hostility of the flames. "Of course, my dear friend. You will get what you desire once we have dealt with the Pantheon. The hell flames shifted in agitation, their ghostly form flickering with anger. And what of the dark flames and its twin? I want them both obliterated, their existence erased from this universe. Dagon's expression remained unreadable, his amused smile still present. Do not worry, my dear friend. I have not forgotten our bargain. Once the Pantheon has been dealt with, the dark flames and its twin shall meet their end. The hell flames seethed with anticipation, eager for the destruction of their ancient enemy. I will hold you to your word, Dagon. Dagon merely waved a dismissive hand. Of course, my friend. You have nothing to worry about. The hell flames flickered one last time in the feed, sending a malevolent gaze toward Michael before vanishing into Dagon's body. It was no secret that the hell flames were the most unstable and vicious of all primordial flames, with a penchant for consuming hatred as fuel. Its choice of Dagon as a host was not surprising, for the fallen god harbored an endless amount of hatred toward the Pantheon. Together, they made a formidable pair with their own twisted agendas, united in their desire to bring destruction to everything the Pantheon had created. As Dagon pondered his plans, a towering orc, one of his generals, materialized before him. The orc knelt before Dagon, showing his utmost respect to the ruler of Hell. The orc's massive frame was covered in thick, dark fur, and his skin was an ashen gray. He had a brutish face with a prominent jawline and a flat, wide nose. His yellow eyes glimmered with fierce intelligence, and his mouth was filled with razor-sharp teeth. The orc's massive shoulders were adorned with spiked pauldrons, and his chest was covered in a thick plate of blackened steel. His arms were thick and muscular, and his hands were large and calloused from years of wielding weapons in battle. He wore gauntlets made from the bones of fallen enemies, and his fingers were adorned with rings made from precious metals and gems. At his waist, he carried a massive, curved blade, its edge glinting in the dim light of the throne room. The hilt of the sword was wrapped in black leather, and its pommel was adorned with a blood-red gemstone. The orc's legs were thick and powerful, covered in fur-lined boots that reached up to his knees. The orc's presence alone exuded power and strength, and his loyalty to Dagon was unwavering. He awaited his ruler's command with a bowed head, ready to carry out his orders no matter the cost. Dagon's eyes gleamed with anticipation as he spoke to his loyal general, the towering orc who knelt before him. Ah, Grimgor. You have arrived just in time. Prepare the Ascension Tower. We will be breaking through the barrier to our home in a matter of hours. Grimgor had faithfully served Dagon for countless years, but he had never expected to hear those words from his lord's mouth. When Dagon spoke of breaking through the barrier to their home, Grimgor's eyes widened in disbelief. Could it really be true? After all these years, was their exile finally coming to an end? My lord, Grimgor stammered, struggling to contain his emotions. He could hardly believe his ears, but the glint in Dagon's eyes told him that this was no jest. His heart raced with excitement and anticipation, but a small part of him held back in fear. After all, they had been exiled to this place for a reason. Dagon seemed to read the orc's thoughts and reassured him with a sly smile. You heard me right, Grimgor. We are going home, he said, his voice filled with excitement and a hint of madness. Grimgor couldn't help but feel a surge of hope and gratitude for his lord's words. He knew that Dagon was a formidable force, feared by many, and that following him was the only chance they had to reclaim their home. As Dagon's maniacal laughter echoed through the castle, Grimgor stood up with a newfound sense of purpose. He would do whatever it took to help Dagon achieve their shared goal. And with the Ascension Tower already prepared, it seemed that their journey home was closer than ever before. But when Grimgor was about to make his way out of the throne hall, he noticed a glimpse of the god of darkness in the feed, causing all his excitement and joy to vanish instantly. His expression transformed from joy to shock and then to sheer terror. Even a brute like Grimgor couldn't hide the fear in his eyes at the sight of the god of darkness. Memories of what happened 5,000 years ago and the destruction brought down by the god of darkness flooded Grimgor's mind, making him tremble in fear. He knew firsthand the devastation that the god of darkness was capable of, and the mere thought of facing him once again was enough to make Grimgor's blood run cold. Dagon noticed the fear in Grimgor's eyes but showed no sign of concern. Instead, he casually waved his hand, dismissing Grimgor's worry. Don't fret, Grimgor. Everything is going according to plan and we won't have to think about him for a long time, Dagon said, a devilish grin spreading across his face. Grimgor tried to hide his fear and nodded, though his expression was still uneasy. He knew better than to doubt his lord's plans, but the memory of the god of darkness and his destructive power still haunted him. Chapter 943 Unleashing the Power. Michael continued to fight the three creatures with fierce determination. He swung his dark sword with precision, slicing through their thick hides and dealing massive damage. The creatures were relentless, however, and continued to attack with their sharp claws and teeth. Blood sprayed across the room as Michael dodged and weaved through their attacks. His black skin was stained with the creature's blood, but he showed no signs of slowing down. With each strike of his sword, he channeled the darkness within him, unleashing waves of dark energy that sent the creatures reeling. One of the creatures managed to sink its teeth into Michael's shoulder, causing him to grunt in pain. He retaliated by plunging his sword into the creature's neck, causing it to roar in agony. As it fell to the ground, Michael ripped the sword out and turned to face the other two creatures. The creatures circled him, growling and snarling with bloodlust. Michael's eyes glowed crimson as he prepared for their next attack. Suddenly, one of the creatures lunged forward, claws extended. Michael sidestepped the attack and countered with a swift kick to the creature's stomach, sending it flying across the room. The third creature charged forward, its massive horns aimed straight for Michael's chest. Michael ducked and rolled under the attack, coming up behind the creature. With one swift motion, he sliced off one of its legs, causing it to stumble and fall to the ground. The creatures continued to attack, their wounds oozing blood onto the stone floor. Michael was bleeding from several cuts and gashes, but he refused to back down. He knew that he had to keep fighting until the creatures were defeated. With a fierce roar, Michael charged forward, ready to deliver the final blow. The creatures braced themselves for impact, but Michael surprised them by unleashing a massive blast of dark energy. The energy engulfed the creatures, causing them to scream in agony as they were consumed by the darkness. As Michael fought the three creatures with his dark sword, Gaia provided air support with her bow and arrows. She flew above the battlefield and scanned the area for any threats. With each pass, she fired a special arrow at the creatures, hitting them with deadly precision. The first arrow she fired was an explosive arrow, which detonated on impact and sent the creatures flying. The second arrow she fired was a freeze arrow, which enveloped the creatures in ice and slowed their movements. The third arrow she fired was a poison arrow, which injected a deadly toxin into the creature's bloodstream and weakened them. Gaia's aim was true, and each arrow hit its mark with devastating effect. The creatures howled in pain and rage as they tried to swat her out of the air, but Gaia was too quick and agile for them. She dodged their attacks with ease and continued to rain down arrows on them, never missing a shot. Her air support was invaluable to Michael, as it gave him the time and space he needed to deal with the creatures one by one. The fight was intense and bloody, with Michael and Gaia fighting for their lives against the formidable creatures. But they were determined to succeed, and with each passing moment, they got closer to victory. The creatures were relentless, but so were Michael and Gaia. They fought with all their might, using every skill and ability they had until finally they had the creatures on the ropes. As Michael and Gaia continued to fight the creatures, they noticed that despite the severe damage they inflicted, the creatures quickly regenerated their limbs and healed their wounds. Michael was not surprised by this as he had encountered similar creatures in the past, but Gaia was taken aback by their ability. With each blow Michael dealt, the creature's limbs would be sliced off or burned by Michael's dark flames, but within moments new limbs would sprout from their stumps and their burns would heal. Even Gaia's special arrows couldn't stop their regeneration. It was like they were fighting a vampire. No matter how many times they cut off a limb, it only grew back stronger. Despite their seemingly infinite regeneration, Michael and Gaia refused to give up. They knew that they had to find a way to defeat the creatures before they overpowered them. As the battle raged on, Michael's fury and frustration began to boil over. The memories of his mother's betrayal and the loss of his dear nightmare weighed heavily on his mind, driving him to lash out with even greater force. With each strike of his dark sword, he poured all his anger and pain into the attack, hacking and slashing at the creatures with a ferocity that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Gaia watched in amazement as Michael unleashed his pent-up emotions on the creatures. She could see the intensity of his attacks and the raw power that he wielded. It was clear that he was using the battle as an outlet for his anger and sorrow, and that he was not ready to let it end until he had fully expressed his emotions. The creature's regeneration abilities proved to be no match for Michael's relentless onslaught. With each attack, he sliced off limbs and tore apart their bodies, leaving them writhing in agony. And yet, despite the punishment they received, the creatures continued to heal themselves, their bodies slowly knitting back together even as Michael hacked them apart. As the battle continued, Michael's attacks became even more savage, fueled by his unrelenting anger and despair. He seemed almost possessed, a whirlwind of darkness and fury that tore through the creatures with unmatched ferocity. And through it all, Gaia stood by his side, providing support with her arrows and marveling at the sheer power and intensity of the god of darkness. Ah! Michael's roar echoed through the battlefield, sending shockwaves through the air. His eyes glowed with otherworldly energy as he unleashed his fury upon the creatures. Each strike of his sword was accompanied by a deafening sound, as if the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. It was a roar of pure rage and anguish, a primal cry that spoke of untold suffering and loss. Michael's eyes burned with a fierce intensity as he unleashed his fury on the creatures. With every swing of his dark sword, he let out a primal roar that echoed through the halls of the castle. His muscles bulged with raw power, fueled by his rage and grief. He attacked the creatures with savage ferocity, his sword slicing through flesh and bone with ease. He didn't care about strategy or finesse. He only wanted to unleash his pent-up anger and frustration. Gaia watched from the sidelines, stunned by the display of raw power and emotion. It was a gruesome and bloody battle, with Michael covered in the blood of his enemies. But he didn't stop, even as his arms grew tired and his breathing became ragged. He was determined to let out all of his suppressed emotions, to unleash his full power, and become the darkness that he was born to be. Gradually, Michael's eyes turned blood-red with fury as he finally decided to end the fight. He lifted his dark sword and called upon the power of the darkness. Suddenly, waves of dark flames erupted from his body, enveloping the entire battlefield in a shroud of darkness. The creatures roared and snarled, but their voices were drowned out by Michael's furious howls. As Michael unleashed the full force of his dark power, the sky above the battlefield turned black as dark lightning bolts crackled and swirled around him. With each swing of his sword, the ground trembled, and the creatures were blasted back by the sheer force of his attacks. The battlefield was plunged into a darkness so deep that it seemed like the end of the world. But through the darkness, Michael could see the glowing eyes of the creatures as they slowly backed away, their bodies charred and burned by the intense flames. Michael continued to roar and unleash waves of dark flames, his anger and frustration fueling his attacks. He knew he couldn't hold back anymore and needed to finish the fight. The dark lightning bolts surrounding him grew stronger and more intense, and suddenly, with one final swing of his sword, a massive explosion of dark energy erupted from his body. The creatures were engulfed in the explosion, their bodies disintegrating into ash as they were consumed by Michael's dark flames. The battlefield was finally still, and the darkness slowly lifted, revealing Michael standing alone amidst the smoldering ruins of the once terrifying creatures. As Gaia watched Michael unleash his power, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe mixed with fear. She had seen Michael use his dark flames and lightning bolts before, but this time it was different. It felt like Michael had truly embraced the darkness within him, letting it consume him and fuel his power. The waves of dark flames that Michael unleashed were unlike anything she had ever seen before. They were so dark and powerful that they seemed to suck the light out of everything around them. The bolts of dark lightning that crackled around him added to the ominous atmosphere, making the battlefield feel like a place of pure darkness and malevolence. Despite her fear, Gaia couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and admiration for Michael. She knew that he was fighting with all his might, not just to defeat the creatures but also to vent his suppressed emotions. The sight of Michael unleashing his full power was both beautiful and terrifying, and it left Gaia feeling a mix of emotions that she couldn't quite put into words. When the three creatures were put out of existence, Michael stood up with a fierce expression on his face. Suddenly, the ground started to crack and break apart as hundreds of Hell Walkers emerged from the depths of hell. They were all different shapes and sizes, but each one was just as terrifying as the last. Gaia's eyes widened in shock and horror as she saw the massive horde of Hell Walkers. She knew they were in for a tough battle. Each Hell Walker was easily powerful enough to kill a fusion-stage cultivator with ease. Their blackened skin was tough as steel, and their glowing red eyes were filled with an insatiable hunger for blood. The horde of Hell Walkers was massive, stretching as far as the eye could see. Their growls were deep and guttural, reverberating through the ground like an earthquake. Their eyes glowed with an eerie red light, and their movements were slow and deliberate, like that of zombies. They appeared almost mindless in their determination to attack and destroy anything in their path. Despite their undead appearance, their physical strength and power were undeniable. Each one of them was strong enough to take on a fusion-stage cultivator with ease, and their numbers were overwhelming. As they emerged from the cracks in the ground, the battlefield was plunged into darkness, and the air was thick with the stench of death and decay. Michael stood calm and collected, unfazed by the horde of Hellwalkers emerging from the ground. His eyes remained fixed on the approaching army, and he raised his hand towards the sky with a serene sense of purpose. The winds around him began to pick up, the air crackling with energy as he prepared to unleash his power. Despite the overwhelming numbers of the Hellwalkers, Michael remained stoic, his gaze unflinching as he called forth the darkness. As Michael raised his hand, the sky seemed to ripple and warp as if it were a mere veil waiting to be pulled back. Suddenly, 3 massive meteors, each one ablaze with a crimson-red flame, appeared in the sky above. They hung there for a moment, suspended in time, before hurtling down toward the horde of Hellwalkers below. The ground shook as the meteors struck the earth, creating massive craters that swallowed up the Hellwalkers. The force of the impact sent shockwaves rippling through the air, shattering nearby structures and kicking up clouds of dust and debris. The sound was deafening, a roar that drowned out all other noise. After discovering the truth about his family, Michael's emotions had been a maelstrom of anger, betrayal, and grief. However, he had used this storm of emotions to fuel his power, and he had truly embraced the darkness within him. This allowed his power to grow beyond any limits he had previously known. With each passing moment, Michael felt his power surge through him like an unstoppable force. The darkness within him had become a part of him, and he had learned to wield it like a weapon. As the smoke cleared, Michael descended from the sky and surveyed the destruction he had wrought. The horde of Hellwalkers lay decimated, reduced to nothing but ash and rubble. The air was thick with the smell of burnt flesh and sulfur, and the ground was scorched black from the heat of the impact. Gaia stared in awe at the sight before her, barely able to comprehend the sheer power that Michael had just unleashed. For a moment she felt a flicker of fear, wondering if Michael's power was too great for him to control. But then she saw the determination in his eyes, the way his jaw was set, and she knew that he was in control. He had unleashed his true power and brought destruction to their enemies, and there was no stopping him now. When the dust settled from the impact of the meteors, the battlefield was unrecognizable. The ground was scorched and cracked, and the air was thick with smoke and the stench of burnt flesh. The bodies of the Hellwalkers were charred and twisted, their once formidable figures reduced to nothing but ash and bone. In the midst of this destruction stood Michael, the god of darkness. His body was wreathed in black flames, and his eyes glowed with an unearthly light. The power he had unleashed upon the battlefield was beyond comprehension, and it was clear that he had truly embraced the darkness within him. Chapter 944 Headmaster of Mazeroth. The following chapter took place before Michael learned about Nightmare's death and appeared at Nagaland. As Michael emerged from the sea realm with Harry in tow, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. He knew that Layla, Harry's mother, would be anxiously awaiting their arrival on the floating mountain. However, Michael was also aware that he had the grim task of informing Layla that her own sister, Edith, had been the one responsible for Harry's abduction. He had no regrets about taking Edith's life. In fact, he only wished he had done so earlier. Michael knew that Layla had loved Edith deeply, even if she had not always shown it, and he was prepared for the potential backlash from both Layla and Harry. Nevertheless, Michael had acted in accordance with what he believed was right and just, and that was all that mattered to him. Michael flew through the starry night sky, holding Harry tightly in his arms, feeling the weight of the child's peaceful slumber against his chest. Michael couldn't help but marvel at how much Harry had grown since he last saw him through the surveillance mirror. The once helpless baby was now a toddler with a full head of messy hair and a chubby yet remarkably resilient body. Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of protectiveness towards the child and a desire to ensure that he could grow up in a world free of violence and chaos. He down at Harry and couldn't help but feel a tinge of guilt. He knew that his actions had caused pain and suffering for those he cared about, including Layla and the innocent child in his arms. But as Michael felt Harry's soft skin and heard his gentle breathing, he also knew that he had made the right choice in killing Edith. No one should have the power to use innocent lives as pawns in a game of power, and Michael was willing to bear the burden of that responsibility. While he soared above the tranquil ocean, Michael wondered what kind of future awaited Harry. Would he grow up to be a hero like his mother, or would he be forever haunted by the darkness that surrounded him? Regardless, Michael was determined to do everything in his power to ensure that Harry had a chance to live a long and fulfilling life. The fate of the world may hang in the balance, but for now, all that mattered was the peaceful slumber of a child in his arms. Michael's thoughts drifted to Harry's future, and it weighed heavily on his mind, causing a dull ache to throb in his temples. Before he had left for the sea realm, Michael had offered to take Layla and Harry with him to the floating mountain, where they would be safe from the dangers of the outside world. But Layla had rejected the offer, adamantly refusing to expose her son to Michael's dark army or to be involved in his war against the world. Michael couldn't blame her for her decision, but he couldn't shake off the feeling that Harry's future was uncertain and that the boy deserved a chance at a peaceful life. Despite Michael's offer to protect Layla and Harry from the dangers of his dark army, Layla had made it clear that she wanted nothing to do with him or his war. Michael couldn't shake off the worry for Harry's future and the nagging feeling that Layla had a plan in place. He tried suggesting sending them to a separate pocket dimension, but Layla refused. As Michael was deep in thought about their safety, a strong gust of wind brushed past him, causing him to stop in his tracks. A feeling of unease crept up on Michael as he sensed a powerful figure suddenly appears behind him. When Michael turned around, he was met with the sight of a towering figure hovering in the air before him. The man appeared to be the embodiment of peace and wisdom, radiating a calming aura that put Michael at ease. He had long flowing white hair and a matching beard that fluttered gently in the wind while his eyes twinkled with a sense of knowing. He wore long flowing purple robes that seemed to billow around him as he moved, and half-moon-shaped glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, giving him an air of intellect and sophistication. "Who you might be?" Michael asked with an air of calmness. The old man took a moment to respond, his gaze slowly scanning over Michael from head to toe. The man exuded an aura of peaceful wisdom, as if he held knowledge of all things in the world. Michael attempted to sense the old man's power, but to his surprise, he found himself unable to do so. It was as if a powerful magic had been placed around the old man to prevent Michael from gauging his strength. The old man's voice was deep and resonant, filled with a sense of wisdom and authority that commanded Michael's attention. The man's eyes sparkled with intelligence behind his half-moon glasses, making it clear that he was not a person to be underestimated. "Such a loss that you chose not to return to Azeroth, Ghost?" the old man repeated, his voice tinged with a hint of regret. "Professor Lane speaks of you often, and that is saying something, considering his usual reluctance to discuss former students." The old man's smile was warm, but there was a hint of something else in his expression that Michael couldn't quite identify. Michael fixed his gaze on the old man before him, his eyes scrutinizing him as he asked, "You didn't answer my question." His tone was calm, but there was an underlying hint of curiosity and suspicion as he tried to discern the identity of the stranger who had appeared before him. "The headmaster of Azeroth, Wulfric Wells III, replied the old man in a calm and collected voice. As Wulfric revealed his identity, Michael's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. The headmaster of Azeroth, one of the most renowned academies of magic, was standing before him. Michael had heard about Wulfric's reputation as an accomplished wizard, but he never expected to meet him in person. Despite his surprise, Michael couldn't help but wonder why Wulfric had come all the way to him. It was clear that the headmaster was not here to fight, but there had to be a reason for his unexpected appearance. Michael's mind raced as he tried to come up with possible explanations for the headmaster's visit. While Michael was trying to decipher why the headmaster of Azeroth had appeared before him, he suddenly sensed a new presence. He turned his gaze and saw Layla, Harry's mother, standing beside Wulfric. Michael was taken aback by her sudden appearance, but he maintained his composure and assessed her expression for any signs of hostility or resentment towards him. Layla's sudden appearance took Michael aback, but he was even more taken aback when he saw the overwhelming joy on her face at the sight of Harry safe and sound in his arms. She cried tears of relief and delight as she rushed towards him. Layla's eyes, which were always cold and calculated, were now filled with warmth and love as she took Harry from Michael's arms and held him tightly. She dashed towards Michael and took Harry into her arms, holding him tightly against her chest. The warmth of Harry's body made her feel alive again, as if a part of her had been missing and had just returned to her. She hugged him tightly, grateful for his safe return, and did not want to let him go. She embraced him with a passion that could only be compared to the fierce love of a mother who had lost her child and now had him back in her arms. In that moment, Layla felt like she was coming back to life. "What happened to him?" Layla asked, her voice laced with concern as she saw her son sleeping in Michael's arms. She immediately feared that something might have happened to him in the sea realm. "He's fine, just sleeping," Michael reassured her. He could sense the love and worry in Layla's voice, and he knew that Harry meant everything to her. "It's best to let him rest for now. He's been through a lot." Layla nodded, relieved to know that Harry was safe and sound. She held him close and whispered soothing words, feeling grateful that Michael had saved her son. As Layla was showering Harry with kisses and hugs, Michael shifted his attention to Wulfric. He had knocked out Layla and left her safely in his castle, so he was puzzled as to how Wulfric had managed to find her. But when Michael examined the energy fluctuations and power radiation surrounding Wulfric, he realized that the headmaster had somehow freed Layla from his castle. After a moment of silence, Michael turned his gaze towards Wulfric Wells and spoke up, breaking the tension. "Why are you here, headmaster?" he inquired, his voice firm and steady. Despite his surprise at Wulfric's sudden appearance, Michael maintained his composure and remained wary of the headmaster's motives. He knew that Wulfric would not have come to him without a good reason, and Michael's instincts told him that it was something important. "We are going to Mazeroth," Layla spoke up, interrupting the silence between Michael and Wulfric. Michael couldn't help but feel a twinge of concern in his heart upon hearing her decision. While he had previously considered Mazeroth as a safe haven for Layla and Harry, he knew all too well that Mazeroth was under the control of Skyhall, his sworn enemies. He couldn't bear the thought of Harry being used as a pawn against him in the future, as had happened with Noah. However, as Michael looked into Layla's eyes, he saw a steely determination that he knew he would not be able to sway. Despite his reservations about Mazeroth, he could see that Layla had made up her mind and would not be dissuaded easily. It was clear to Michael that Layla was fiercely protective of her son and was willing to do whatever it took to keep him safe, even if it meant going against Michael's wishes. He knew it would be a difficult battle to try and convince her otherwise. Wulfric could see the worry in Michael's eyes, and he spoke in a calm and reassuring tone. "You can trust me, Michael. Mazeroth is not under Skyhall's control," Wulfric said, sensing Michael's concerns about Harry's safety. Michael still had doubts about sending Harry to Mazeroth. He knew Skyhall had a firm grip on many realms, including Mazeroth, and he feared that they might use Harry as a weapon against him in the future. "Who says they don't control it, headmaster? They control almost everything, and imagine what they would do to him once they learn he's my blood," Michael countered, expressing his concerns to Wulfric. "I made my decision, Ghost. We are going to Mazeroth, where my son will receive the education and safety he deserves." Layla interrupted Michael before he could say a word. Michael was about to argue, but Layla's eyes were determined and unwavering. "You didn't listen to me when you rushed into absorbing the first energy. You didn't listen to me when I asked you to keep an eye on Harry. Your decisions have put either you or those around you in danger every time. And now you are willing to risk his life." Michael tried to reason with her, but Layla cut him off once again. "Stop." Layla's voice was firm yet gentle. "I made my decision, Ghost. You were the one who cut all ties with us. I asked you to leave everything behind and come with us, but you refused. You didn't want any part in our lives. I am sorry we dragged you into this, but it won't happen again once we reach Mazeroth. I trust Headmaster Wells, and this is my final decision," Layla said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Michael tried to reason with Layla, arguing that Mazeroth was not as safe as she thought and that Harry's safety could not be guaranteed. He reminded her of the dangers they faced in the past and the fact that their enemies would stop at nothing to get to him. But Layla remained steadfast in her decision, and her trust in Wulfric was unshakable. Michael's frustration grew as he realized he could not change her mind, and he knew that arguing further would only cause more tension between them. Eventually, Michael relented, knowing that Layla's decision was final. He silently hoped that he would not regret letting Harry go to Mazeroth and that he would find a way to keep him safe from afar. Layla let out a deep sigh, her voice laced with regret and sadness as she spoke. "It seems like the darkness has truly changed you, Ghost. Even now, you are reluctant to let us go to Mazeroth as if you value your own safety above our lives." Michael could feel her words piercing through him, but he could not deny that there was a grain of truth to them. Michael knew there was no point in arguing with Layla, so he approached Harry and gently placed his hand on the sleeping child. He bent over and placed a soft kiss on Harry's forehead, whispering, "Goodbye, Harry. I wish things were really different." He had hoped that his reluctance to let Harry go to Mazeroth would have made Layla reconsider her decision, but it seemed that she had made up her mind. Despite the weight of the truth about Edith's death, Michael remained silent as he bid farewell to Harry and Layla. He knew that revealing the truth would only cause more pain and heartache. Besides, Layla didn't ask any questions about Harry's abduction, showing that all she cared about was her son's safe return. "I will hold you accountable, Headmaster. If the Skyhall dares to play any games with them, I will show you why they call me the Dark Lord," Michael said with a deep, commanding voice. The sky darkened as his words echoed across the ocean, and bolts of lightning illuminated his face, highlighting the power emanating from him. The full moon blackened as if in deference to his might, and the wind picked up, blowing fiercely around him. Chapter 945. The dead of the previous Dark Lord the sound of breaking glass echoed across the dark sky as Michael's meteorite spell cleared out the horde of Hellwalkers. As Gaia stood there in awe, she noticed that the castle was suddenly much closer than before. Michael quickly grabbed her by the waist, and with a swift movement, they both leaped into the air. The wind rushed past them as they soared towards the castle gates. As they approached the gates, Michael's eyes were fixed on the target, calculating their landing with precision. He angled his body and adjusted his speed, and just as they reached the ground, he landed with a light thud right before the castle gates. When Michael landed before the castle, Gaia's eyes widened in shock and horror at the sight before her. The castle of the ruler of hell was a massive, foreboding structure with black stone walls that reached up toward the dark, stormy sky. The gates were made of iron and adorned with twisted demonic faces, and the courtyard was filled with strange, otherworldly creatures. The air was thick with the stench of sulfur and brimstone, and the sound of screams echoed from within the castle's walls. The atmosphere was oppressive, almost suffocating, and Gaia felt like she was being swallowed up by darkness. The castle was surrounded by jagged peaks and a moat of boiling lava, adding to the foreboding atmosphere. In the distance, the skies were dark and foreboding, with black clouds swirling and lightning flashing in every direction. There was no sun or moon or natural light to guide one's way. Instead, the only light came from the flickering flames that rose up from the molten lava rivers that ran through the realm. The landscape was barren and desolate, devoid of any signs of life or beauty. The ground was rough and jagged, littered with sharp rocks and broken bones. As Gaia took in her surroundings, she couldn't help but feel a sense of despair and hopelessness wash over her. She could hear the distant sounds of screams and cries of agony, reminding her that she was in a place of eternal suffering. As they made their way towards the castle gates, she could see twisted demonic faces carved into the stone walls and strange, otherworldly creatures lurking in the shadows. The closer they got to the castle gates, the more Gaia felt like the darkness was closing in on her. She could see the twisted faces on the gates leering at her, and the air was thick with the stench of sulfur and brimstone. Gaia couldn't imagine how anyone could survive in a place like this. It was a place of unspeakable darkness and horror, ruled by an entity of unfathomable power and malice. And yet, they had to enter the castle and face the ruler of hell if they were to save Nightmare. As they stepped through the gates and into the castle, Gaia could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down on her. The walls were lined with skulls and bones of all shapes and sizes, arranged in twisted patterns. The floors were slick with blood and littered with the remains of the tortured souls who had met their gruesome fates within these walls. Despite the bone-chilling sight of the castle, Gaia found solace in the fact that she was with Michael, the god of darkness and her fiancé. Being by his side gave her an indescribable sense of comfort, even as they ventured deeper into the heart of hell. As Michael stepped onto the castle grounds, the wind picked up, sending chills down Gaia's spine. Thunder rumbled in the distance and flashes of lightning illuminated the ominous sky, casting an eerie glow across the barren landscape. As they approached the towering steel doors of the castle, Gaia couldn't help but feel a sense of dread building within her. The doors were adorned with intricate carvings of skulls, bones and disfigured bodies, all of which looked like they had been twisted and contorted into grotesque forms. The door's surface was cold to the touch, as if it had been forged from the very depths of hell itself. The floor was slick with blood and littered with the remains of what appeared to be tortured souls, and the air was thick with the scent of decay and brimstone. The flickering torches cast an eerie glow on the walls, making it seem as though the castle was alive with malevolent spirits. The walls were made of black stone, and the floors were slick with what appeared to be blood. Gaia could see strange, otherworldly creatures lurking in the shadows, their eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. The air was thick with the stench of sulfur and decay, and the only sounds that could be heard were the faint cries and screams of the damned. The flickering torches cast eerie shadows on the walls, and Gaia could feel the eyes of unseen beings following their every move. Despite the castle's foreboding appearance, Michael continued onward with unshakable resolve. Gaia held on to his arm tightly, taking comfort in his reassuring presence. As they navigated through the labyrinthine hallways, Gaia could feel her heart racing with every step they took. The darkness seemed to swallow them up as they moved deeper into the castle's depths. Gaia could feel the weight of the castle bearing down on her as if it were trying to crush her very soul. The stench of decay grew stronger, and the sounds of suffering grew louder with every passing moment. Gaia could feel her resolve starting to falter as they approached the throne room, where the ruler of hell awaited them. But as she looked up at Michael's unwavering gaze, she felt renewed strength and determination. With Michael by her side, she knew that she could face whatever horrors awaited them in the depths of hell. As they made their way through the castle's corridors, Michael's eyes scanned their surroundings, taking in the macabre decor and the twisted artwork that adorned the walls. Gaia walked beside him, her hand gripping his tightly as she surveyed the gruesome surroundings with disgust. "I can't believe this is real," she muttered, glancing at Michael. "Is this hell?" Michael merely shrugged, his expression unreadable. "That's a good bet," he replied with eerie calmness in his voice. Gaia shook her head, her eyes scanning the twisted tapestries that adorned the walls. "I wonder what awaits us in this castle. I have a bad feeling about this, Michael." Michael remained calm, his gaze fixed ahead as they made their way through the darkened halls. "Whatever or whoever it is, we will face them and get out of this place alive." "I had seen enough deaths for one day," he replied. As they approached the throne hall, Michael's pace quickened, his eyes fixed ahead. Gaia felt her heart race as they stepped through the doors, revealing the foreboding chamber beyond. "You're not scared at all, are you?" she asked softly, her eyes fixed on the twisted tapestries that adorned the walls. Gaia's voice trembled as she glanced around the twisted and gruesome surroundings. "This place is unnerving. The darkness, the lifeless bodies, and everything else. It's creeping me out," she murmured, her grip tightening around Michael's hand. "I sometimes wish I were the goddess of darkness like you so that I could be as fearless as you." Michael merely smiled, his gaze fixed ahead as they made their way through the twisted throne room. Darkness can be a source of fear for many, but for those who embrace it, it can be a powerful tool. Fear is natural, but it's what we do in the face of that fear that defines us. I choose to use the darkness to my advantage, to harness its power and overcome my fears. In the end, it's not the darkness that we should fear, but our own inability to confront it. Finally, Michael arrived at the door to the throne hall and paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. Since he had begun to embrace the darkness within him fully, fear no longer held any power over him. Without hesitation, he pushed the door open and strode into the throne hall calmly and unwaveringly. The throne hall was a foreboding chamber filled with a pervading sense of darkness and malice. The walls were adorned with grotesque tapestries depicting scenes of torture and suffering, and the air was thick with the stench of sulfur and brimstone. In the center of the room stood a massive throne carved from blackened bones and adorned with the skulls of defeated enemies. The throne was surrounded by flickering torches, casting eerie shadows on the walls and illuminating the ruler of hell who sat upon it, a figure of immense power and malice. Dagon's voice rang out as Michael and Gaia finally strode into the throne hall. "Took you long enough," he said, his tone dripping with malice and impatience. When the words of Dagon echoed through the hall, Gaia caught sight of the ruler of hell. She couldn't help but feel a shiver run down her spine. He was an imposing figure, with jet-black skin, 3 blazing eyes, and a wicked grin that revealed rows of razor-sharp teeth. His 4 muscular arms hung by his side, each adorned with a different weapon, and a set of large wings sprouted from his back, twitching with excitement as he surveyed his guests. Sitting upon his throne, which was carved from blackened bones and adorned with the skulls of defeated enemies, the ruler of hell was the epitome of power and malice. His eyes burned with a fierce flame, reflecting the fires of the underworld, and his face was twisted in a wicked grin that sent shivers down Gaia's spine. Despite his formidable appearance, the ruler of hell remained calm and composed, his eyes fixed upon Michael as he approached. As Michael and Gaia approached, the ruler of hell rose from his throne, towering over them with his massive frame. He surveyed them with a predatory gleam in his eye, his nostrils flaring as he breathed in their scent. Gaia couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as the ruler of hell loomed over them. His presence was overwhelming and menacing. She knew that they were in the presence of a being of great power, and she could only hope that Michael was up to the challenge if things went south. Although Michael felt no fear in his heart, he couldn't help but feel a sense of surprise upon seeing the ruler of hell for the first time. If the devil that Michael had heard about in stories had a physical form, it would be the man who sat on the imposing throne before him. Gaia, who had always been fearless, even cowered behind Michael at the sight of the ruler. She tightly gripped Michael's shoulder as they watched the ruler of hell slowly descend the steps. Each step he took seemed to shake the very foundations of the castle as if the ground beneath them was trembling in fear. As he approached them, Michael noticed that the ruler's eyes seemed to glow with an otherworldly light, and his presence was suffocating as Michael and Gaia stood before the imposing figure of the ruler of hell. Dagon's deep voice reverberated through the throne hall. "Time does fly, huh?" he said, his tone almost playful. "It feels like only yesterday you stood there at the same place you are right now and proposed an alliance with the ruler of hell." Michael was taken aback, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of Dagon's words. But 5,000 years have passed, Dagon continued, a hint of amusement in his voice. Michael was stunned. His previous self had reset the universe 5,000 years ago, and he had assumed that everyone had been affected. But Dagon seemed to be an exception. Michael searched for any sign of deceit in the ruler's eyes, but found none. "You are not affected?" Michael asked, his confusion evident in his voice. "We were allies and you made an exception, Michael." Michael's shock deepened as Dagon spoke his true name, a name that no one in the universe should have known. Michael's eyes widened as he realized that the ruler of hell had some knowledge that he should not possess. Gaia noticed the change in Michael's demeanor and squeezed his hand reassuringly, but Michael remained lost in thought, trying to piece together the puzzle before him. Only Gaia knew his true name, and Michael had gone to great lengths to keep it that way. His mind raced as he tried to figure out how Dagon had learned his name, but he could find no answers unless his previous self revealed his name to Dagon for some reason. "I have to give you credit, Michael. 5,000 years ago, you said you'd be here." Dagon spoke with a hint of amusement in his voice, his eyes fixed on Michael. His tone was both mysterious and playful, leaving Michael to wonder what else Dagon knew. Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as he studied the ruler of hell. Despite his confidence, Michael knew that Dagon was not to be underestimated. "What else did I say?" Michael took a step forward, his eyes fixed on Dagon's face. Dagon's lips curved into a sly smile, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "That you will settle your debt to me." Chapter 946. The debt of the previous Dark Lord. Michael's expression turned grim as he heard Dagon mention the debt. He couldn't imagine what kind of deal his past self had made with the ruler of hell, but he knew it must have been something significant. Dagon, on the other hand, seemed amused by Michael's reaction. His eyes glinted with a mischievous light as he spoke, relishing in the god of darkness discomfort. Despite his discomfort, Michael remained calm, trying to assess the situation. He knew that if his past self had revealed his realm name to Dagon, there must have been a reason for it. Dagon's voice rang out across the throne hall, filling the space with a sinister, almost playful tone. "Let me sweeten the pot for you, Michael," he said, a wry smile playing across his lips. "If you help me, I will give back the soul of your recently departed friend." Michael and Gaia stood frozen, their eyes widening in shock and disbelief. For a moment, Michael couldn't believe what he was hearing. The idea of getting his friend's soul back was something he had never even dared to dream of. But the suddenness of Dagon's offer left him feeling uneasy. Gaia too was stunned by Dagon's words. Her heart raced as she stared at the ruler of hell, struggling to comprehend what was happening. The thought of seeing her dear little lizard Nightmare once more filled her with a mix of emotions: joy, hope, and fear. Michael and Gaia were both stunned at Dagon's words. Michael's heart raced with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Could it be possible that Nightmare's soul was trapped in hell all this time? And could they finally have the chance to get it back? Gaia's eyes widened in surprise, and her hand tightened on Michael's shoulder. The thought of Nightmare's soul being trapped in hell was horrifying, and the possibility of getting it back was both exciting and terrifying. They both looked at Dagon, waiting for him to elaborate on his offer. Gaia's heart was pounding as she struggled to comprehend what she had just heard. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice quavering with fear and hope. The thought of seeing her beloved pet Nightmare again filled her with a fierce longing. Dagon merely smirked, his eyes glinting with amusement. He snapped his fingers, and a ghostly figure of a small baby dragon appeared beside him. Michael felt his breath catch in his throat as he recognized the form. It was Nightmare in his younger years. Michael couldn't believe his eyes. Nightmare, his loyal companion and friend, had been lost to him for what felt like an eternity. And now, the possibility of seeing him again, even in this spectral form, filled him with a mix of emotions. He felt a pang of guilt for not being able to save him before, but also a spark of hope that they might be able to bring him back. Dagon's face twisted into an evil smile as he clenched his fist. "Do what I ask of you and you will get his soul back. Otherwise..." His voice trailed off ominously. Suddenly, a loud roar filled the throne room, a pained and agonized cry that seemed to come from the very depths of hell itself. Michael and Gaia watched in horror as they saw the ghostly form of Nightmare floating beside Dagon, his unconscious body racked with pain. Gaia's heart sank as she realized the true gravity of the situation. They had to help Dagon if they wanted to save their beloved friend. At the sound of Nightmare's cry, Michael's heart sank. The thought of his dear friend's soul being trapped in hell filled him with dread and panic. Without a second thought, he raised his hand in a gesture for Dagon to stop. Stop, Michael said firmly, his eyes fixed on the ghostly form of Nightmare. As Gaia rushed towards Dagon to rescue Nightmare, Michael's heart sank with dread and panic. He knew that Dagon was not to be trifled with, and Gaia's impulsive action could have dire consequences. However, before he could intervene, a powerful gust of wind shot from Dagon's body, throwing both Michael and Gaia off their feet and pinning them against the wall. "What do you want?" Michael demanded, his voice strained as he struggled to catch his breath. Despite his natural inclination to rebel against anyone who tried to control him, Michael realized that he was in no position to challenge Dagon's authority. The realm of hell was an inhospitable place, and Dagon was the supreme ruler who held absolute power over it. Although the previous Dark Lord had the power to go against Dagon, Michael's current version was weak in front of him. Knowing that Dagon held the soul of Nightmare, Michael couldn't afford to provoke him. Gaia's failed attempt at rescuing the soul was a reminder of how powerless they were in hell. With a sense of dread and defeat, Michael growled, "Tell me what you want me to do." He didn't dare fight against Dagon in a realm where he held absolute power. Getting back Nightmare's soul was his priority, and he was willing to do whatever it took to get it back. It was a difficult pill to swallow, but Michael knew that he would do anything to get Nightmare's soul back. He glanced at Gaia, who was still recovering from the gust of wind that had sent her flying. He felt a surge of anger and frustration, but he knew that now was not the time to act on it. He needed to focus on the task at hand, whatever it might be. "How can I be sure that this is not some sort of trick?" Michael asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. Dagon raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement playing on his lips. "You have no reason to doubt me," he replied coolly. "And besides, what choice do you have but to believe me? If you want the soul of your dear friend back, you will do as I say." Michael's jaw clenched as he fought to control his anger. He knew that Dagon was right, he had no other choice but to trust him. Dagon's voice dripped with sinister amusement as he spoke. "Luckily for you, this task is right up your alley. You are known for your skill in killing after all. I need you to eliminate someone for me." With a flick of his wrist, a holographic image appeared beside him, revealing a long-haired orc with a muscular build and a fierce expression. The orc's eyes seemed to glint with a hint of cruelty, and his armor was adorned with the bones of his enemies. "Go kill him and bring his head to me. Getting back Nightmare's soul is just as easy as this," Dagon said nonchalantly, his voice echoing through the throne room. With a flick of his wrist, the force that had been pinning Michael and Gaia against the wall dissipated, and they landed on the ground with a thud. Michael and Gaia exchanged a glance, both of them knowing that they had no other choice but to agree to Dagon's demands. Dagon turned his back to Michael and Gaia and began ascending the stairs leading to his throne, the echoes of his footsteps resonating through the silent chamber. As he climbed, he continued to speak in his nonchalant tone. "My minion will guide you to his last known location. You have 3 hours to complete the task," he said, his voice carrying a hint of warning. Michael opened his mouth to say something, but before he could even utter a word, a sudden force enveloped him and Gaia, and they were instantly teleported away from the throne hall. The world around them dissolved into nothingness before being replaced by a dark, twisted landscape. The suddenness of the teleportation caught them off guard, and they stumbled as they landed on the hard ground. As they regained their footing, Michael took a deep breath, steeling himself for the task ahead. As Michael and Gaia were searching for Dagon's minion, a loud buzzing sound caught their attention. They turned to see a giant mosquito hovering in front of them. The mosquito was at least 6 feet long and had a wingspan wider than Michael's outstretched arms. Its long thin legs were covered in a dense layer of hair, and its bulbous eyes gleamed in the dim light of the realm of hell. Before Michael could react, Gaia, who was always quick to action, shot the mosquito down. "Wait, wait, wait," the mosquito cried out in a whiny buzzing sound. "I am not your target, I'm here to guide you to it." Michael raised an eyebrow, surprised at the fact that a mosquito was capable of speech. "You're our guide?" he asked skeptically. The mosquito nodded frantically. Yes, I swear on my proboscis. They'll show you the way, just don't squish me." "Sorry about that," Michael said, offering the mosquito a helping hand to get back in the air. "We're a bit on edge after what happened in the castle." I understand, the mosquito replied, still buzzing nervously. "But trust me, I'm on your side. And the best guide around here. Now, let's get going before any more mishaps happen." As Michael and Gaia followed the panicky mosquito through the hellish landscape, they couldn't help but drown in their own thoughts. The thought of having to kill someone weighed heavily on Michael's mind, while Gaia couldn't shake off the image of Nightmare's ghostly figure. Meanwhile, The mosquito continued to chatter on in a whiny voice, providing a commentary on the grotesque and macabre scenery around them. "Oh, look at that lovely sulfuric lake over there. Makes my wings itch just thinking about it," the mosquito exclaimed, sounding both panicked and amused. "Be careful of the acid pools," Buzz warned. "One touch and you'll be burned to a crisp. And watch out for the hell walkers, they're a nasty bunch. And whatever you do, don't step on the lava rocks. They're hotter than the sun." Michael and Gaia listened in silence, drowning in their own thoughts. Buzz's chattering was both funny and annoying at the same time, and they couldn't help but tune him out. However, every now and then Buzz's panicked buzzing would snap them back to attention. Michael and Gaia could barely keep up with the mosquito's rapid chatter, but couldn't help but find its comical observations amusing. "And watch out for those fiery geysers. One wrong step and poof, you'll be roasted alive," the mosquito continued, flitting around their heads. Despite the absurdity of their situation, Michael and Gaia remained focused on their mission, determined to do whatever it takes to retrieve Nightmare's soul. But for the moment they couldn't help but listen to the mosquito's ramblings and let out a few chuckles. "Are you even listening to me?" Buzz screeched, his wings buzzing furiously. "I'm trying to save your lives here." Michael sighed. "Yes, we're listening, Buzz. But can you give us a moment of silence to gather our thoughts?" "Silence? In hell." Buzz cackled. "Good luck with that. But sure, go ahead, take all the time you need." Michael and Gaia exchanged a tired look as Buzz continued to chatter on. It was going to be a long journey. As they flew across the barren wasteland, Buzz pointed out various landmarks, such as the Lake of Fire, which he described as a great spot for swimming if you didn't mind being burned alive. Michael and Gaia couldn't help but shake their heads in amusement at Buzz's dark sense of humor. His buzzing voice was surprisingly entertaining, and his comical observations gave them a much-needed distraction from the horrors of hell. Though the weight of their task still hung heavy over them, the levity provided by Buzz's chatter allowed them to forget the danger that lay ahead momentarily. As Buzz continued to guide Michael and Gaia through the hellish landscape, his commentary had eased their worries and fears. However, his light-hearted tone suddenly took a dark turn when he brought up his ex-girlfriend. "You know that orc you're supposed to kill? I bet he stole my girlfriend," Buzz exclaimed, his buzzing voice filled with anger. Michael and Gaia exchanged a bewildered look, unsure how to respond to the mosquito's sudden outburst. "I mean, I may look like this, but am a killer at heart. I could take him down in a million ways," Buzz boasted, flexing his wings as if he were some sort of warrior. Michael couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of the tiny mosquito trying to act tough. Gaia, too, had a small smile on her face. As they flew over the landscape of hell, Buzz continued to vent his frustrations about his ex-girlfriend and her alleged affair with the orc. "That stupid orc is lucky Dagon sent you after him," he grumbled. "Otherwise, I would have taught him a lesson he wouldn't forget." Michael and Gaia exchanged a look but said nothing, not wanting to provoke Buzz any further. Buzz continued to ramble on about his plans to take down the orc, describing in hilarious detail the various methods he would use to kill him. "I would have stung him with my venomous tail and then buzzed around his head until he couldn't take it anymore," he exclaimed, his wings buzzing furiously with excitement. Gaia couldn't help but giggle at the absurdity of it all while Michael simply shook his head and sighed. Even in the midst of their dangerous mission, Buzz's antics provided a much-needed moment of levity. Following Michael and Gaia followed Buzz's directions, they eventually reached a barren wasteland, with only occasional bursts of flames in the distance. The sky above them was a sickly shade of green, with lightning bolts crackling in the clouds. Buzz led them to a rocky outcrop, where Michael saw a dark cave in the distance, surrounded by an ominous aura. The wind howled around them and Michael could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "Is that where we're headed?" Michael asked, his voice barely audible over the howling winds. Buzz pointed his long thin leg towards the cave and exclaimed, "Yes. That's where the cheatin' orc resides, and I'm gonna make him pay for what he did to me and my girl." Michael and Gaia exchanged a skeptical glance as they looked at the giant mosquito in front of them. Gaia whispered to Michael, "Do you think he knows he's a mosquito and not a warrior?" But Buzz didn't seem to care about their doubts. He continued to boast about his fighting skills. "He'll take him down with one swift bite of my proboscis. Or maybe he'll use my powerful wings to create a gust and blow him away." Michael couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of the 6-foot-long mosquito attempting to take down an orc. "You know, Buzz, I think you're underestimating the orc's strength. He might not go down as easily as you think." But Buzz was too busy pumping himself up to listen. "Nonsense. I am Buzz, the mighty mosquito warrior. No orc can defeat me." As they approached the cave, Buzz's bravado started to waver. He began to buzz nervously, maybe we should wait outside and come up with a better plan. Or maybe we can just ask him nicely to give me back my girl. Gaia rolled her eyes and muttered under her breath, yeah, because that's definitely going to work. Michael sighed and turned to Buzz. Listen, Buzz. We have a job to do. We need to get in there and take down the orc. Are you with us? Buzz hesitated for a moment, his wings fluttering uncertainly. But then he straightened up, puffing out his chest. Of course I'm with you. And Buzz, the fearless mosquito warrior. Let's go get that orc. Chapter 947. Devotee of Noah from another realm. As a seasoned assassin, Michael knew the importance of thorough preparation before taking on a target. He would typically start by gathering intelligence on the target's habits, movements, and routines. This could involve scouting out their usual locations, monitoring their communications, and identifying their vulnerabilities. Once Michael had a clear understanding of his target, he would then carefully plan his approach. This would involve identifying the best time and location to strike, considering potential obstacles or hazards, and determining the most effective method for carrying out the assassination. Finally, Michael would ensure he had all the necessary equipment and resources at his disposal. This could include weapons, tools for disabling security measures, and escape routes. By taking these steps, Michael could increase his chances of success while minimizing the risk of being caught or discovered. Standing before the ominous cave, Michael assessed his options. Sneaking into the cave was one possibility, but it was risky because he had no idea what kind of traps or obstacles might be waiting for him inside. The other option was to lure the orc out into the open and confront him directly. Michael weighed the pros and cons of both options and ultimately decided that the latter was the safer choice. He could use his combat skills to defeat the orc in a fair fight rather than risking his life in a trap-filled cave. Michael couldn't understand why Dagon didn't come and kill the orc himself. He couldn't fathom the idea that the ruler of hell was weaker than the orc. However, he didn't have the luxury of pondering on this any further. Michael stood outside the cave, analyzing the situation before him. He decided to take action and raised his hand, channeling his dark energy. Suddenly, a bolt of black lightning shot from the tip of his finger, illuminating the area with its ominous glow. Buzz slowly flew backward, his 6-foot-long body trembling with fear. His bulbous eyes widened as he watched Michael unleash the bolt of lightning. Despite his tough talk earlier, Buzz was now realizing that he was way over his head. He covered himself with his wings and prayed for safety. After firing the lightning bolt, Michael tensed, waiting for the orc to appear. Sure enough, the ground began to shake and stir, and a moment later, the massive figure of the orc emerged from the depths of the cave. He was a towering figure with bulging muscles that rippled beneath his armor. His long hair was tied back in a loose knot, and his fierce eyes scanned the landscape. In one hand he held a giant sword, which he dragged along the rocky ground behind him. Michael and Gaia remained calm before the orc, who seemed unperturbed by their presence. "I was wondering when you would come to take my life," the orc said calmly, as though he had been expecting them. Michael couldn't help but make a joke, pointing towards Buzz. "I heard you stole his girlfriend," he said with a smirk. At the mention of his girlfriend, Buzz's tiny heart skipped a beat. He felt a surge of anger and embarrassment, and for a moment he considered flying away from the area. But he knew that he couldn't abandon Michael and Gaia, not when they were so close to their goal. So instead, he buzzed around Michael's head, trying to make himself heard above the wind. The orc raised an eyebrow, looking from Michael to Buzz and back again. "I see," he said, his voice laced with amusement. "So you're here for revenge, little mosquito? Well, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. I don't have a girlfriend, stolen or otherwise." Buzz let out a high-pitched whine, clearly not believing the orc's words. "Don't listen to him. He's lying. I saw him with her myself." The orc's response was unexpected as he simply shrugged, and a wry smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe I swatted her accidentally," he quipped, his tone betraying a hint of amusement. As they stood there facing the orc, Buzz flew over to Michael and whispered urgently in his ear, "How sure are you that you can take him down?" "I forgot to take my meds, and if you can give me enough time I can fly back to the castle, take my meds and come back to help you fight him." Michael shot Buzz a skeptical look, unsure if the mosquito was bluffing or not. However, he couldn't afford to take any chances, especially with Nightmare's soul on the line. "We'll be fine, Buzz. Just stay out of harm's way," he replied, hoping to reassure the jittery insect. Buzz nodded, his wings buzzing nervously as Michael turned his attention back to the orc. The orc had crossed his arms and was regarding Michael and Gaia with a look of mild interest. Michael couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease at the orc's nonchalant attitude. Michael's voice was calm but firm as he addressed the orc. Normally, I don't take anyone's life without knowing what they did. But in your case I have to make an exception. Dagon has someone I care about and he wants your life as the price. So, do you have anything to tell us before we do this? Michael carefully observed the orc, trying to gauge his cultivation level. But to his surprise he couldn't get a read on the orc's strength. Despite this uncertainty, Michael remained confident in his abilities. His instincts had never failed him before and they told him he could take down the orc. The orc broke the silence, his voice low and steady. I only have one request, he said, holding out a silver pendant. When you take my life, take this and give it to the Bringer of Light before you fight him. Michael's heart skipped a beat at the mention of the Bringer of Light. The memory of discovering the truth about his family still stung, and the name Noah was like a punch to the gut. Noah, the god of light and Michael's twin brother. He clenched his fist, feeling a wave of anger and sadness wash over him. The orc leveled his sword at Michael, proclaiming, "One day the Bringer of Light shall emerge from the mortal realm and bring radiance to the darkened domain of the gods. He shall put an end to the heinous actions of the gods, starting with you." Michael was completely taken aback by the orc's words. He couldn't make sense of what the orc was saying, but one thing was certain, this orc was not from his world. The way he spoke of the realm of the gods was unlike anything Michael had ever heard before. It was as though the orc had lived in a completely different world, one that was beyond Michael's comprehension. "So, you serve the god of light, Noah, and wish for him to kill me?" Michael snickered, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Well, thanks for telling me. Now, I can take your life without any hesitation or remorse," he continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm and contempt. Michael had no idea what kind of allegiance this orc had with Noah, but he couldn't let that distract him from his mission. The fate of Nightmare's soul hung in the balance, and he couldn't afford to be sidetracked by this orc's beliefs. As Michael raised his sword, the orc simply smirked, his eyes filled with a kind of resignation. He knew that his time had come and was ready to face his fate. "May you never step into the realm of gods," the orc spat, his voice filled with venom. "Take my life in an honorable duel, Dark Lord." The orc's challenge for an honorable duel didn't faze Michael, who calmly took a step back and prepared himself for the fight. He glanced over his shoulder at Gaia, who nodded in agreement with his decision. She had faith in Michael's abilities. After all, he had defeated Peter's Hellwalker form and had the power to topple kingdoms. Even though the orc emitted strange energy radiation around him, Gaia was confident that he posed no real threat to Michael. Michael raised his hand with a sense of purpose, and in response, his dark sword flew out of its sheath and landed squarely in his hand. He swung it around once to get a feel for its weight and balance, then pointed it towards the orc, taunting him to make the first move. The orc charged at Michael with his giant sword raised, determined to take him down. Michael dodged his attacks with ease, his movements graceful and precise. He countered with swift strikes of his own, his dark sword glinting in the dim light of the realm of hell. As the duel between the orc and Michael continued, sparks flew and the sound of clanging swords echoed through the wasteland. The orc was a fierce opponent, but Michael's skill and agility were unmatched. He could sense the orc's attacks before they even happened, and he effortlessly parried each strike with his dark sword. The duel seemed to go on for hours, but in reality, only a few seconds had passed since the battle began. Despite only a few seconds passing, Michael quickly learned that the orc was an exceptional swordsman. Michael's Sword of Destiny technique was renowned for its power and ability to defeat any swordsman, yet the orc managed to deflect Michael's attacks. Michael was surprised at the orc's swordsmanship skills. But what surprised him even more was the strength and durability of the orc sword, which withstood the full force of the dark sword's attack. Although the orc deflected the dark sword without directly clashing with it, the dark sword still managed to chip away at the orc sword, leaving a small mark on its surface. Unbeknownst to Michael, Noah had conducted an extensive study of the previous Dark Lord's abilities 5,000 years ago. He wrote his findings in a book and sent it to the realm of gods before the previous Dark Lord reset the universe. The orc that Michael was facing was one of the divine beings who had managed to acquire a few pages from this sacred book, which contained information about the Dark Lord's Sword of Destiny. With this knowledge, the orc had trained himself to become a formidable opponent for Michael, hoping to fulfill his duty to serve Noah and stop the atrocities of the gods. Michael had always appreciated a good sword fight as it helped him hone his skills. However, he had no time to spare today. He was running short on time and needed to end the fight quickly. As the orc aggressively attacked Michael, hoping to land at least one hit, Michael blocked the orc sword with the dark sword. He then quickly raised his other hand and summoned a powerful wind blast, sending the orc flying backward. Michael's wind blast was so powerful that it sent the orc crashing into a nearby boulder, shattering it into pieces. The orc groaned in pain as he struggled to get back on his feet. Michael slowly walked towards the orc, sword in hand, ready to deliver the final blow. As Michael approached the orc, a thick aura of darkness began to emanate from him, causing the surrounding area to turn pitch black. The orc struggled to get back on his feet, but before he could fully stand up, Michael clenched his fist, and the darkness around the orc coalesced into an invisible hand that pushed the orc back to the ground, holding him in place. The orc strained against the grip of the darkness, but it was no use. Michael had complete control over the shadows. Many fear the darkness, but they forget that it is within the shadows where true power lies. "Embrace the darkness and you shall never fear the light again," Michael said. As the orc tried to break free from the darkness that enveloped him, Michael's eyes began to glow with a sinister black light. It was as if the darkness within him was manifesting itself in his eyes, ready to strike down any who dared oppose him. With a focused stare, Michael unleashed a barrage of dark energy beams that shot out from his eyes and struck the struggling orc with deadly precision, causing the ground beneath him to tremble.